Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidnee Stevens. Pinckneyville, located in the United States, is a small town known for its friendly local community and laid-back lifestyle. It is also a great place for fishing enthusiasts. On July 25, 2010, two fishermen were fishing in the near Boku Creek Bridge south of Pinckneyville when they spotted a strange object in the water. Approaching it, they realized it was the body of a girl floating face down. Her right arm was tied with a rope to a concrete block, but the body had risen to the surface due to decomposition and shallow water. The body was in a deteriorated state, making identification difficult. The only clues were a belly piercing and a necklace with a musical note pendant. After checking the information in the database, law enforcement officers discovered that a similar girl had recently disappeared. She was Sidnee Stevens, 15, who had gone missing on July 19, 2010, exactly 1 week before body was discovered. Sidnee's parents, Tracy and Tim, said she had recently suffered from mental health issues after learning that they had separated shortly before she went missing. She was shocked to learn that Tim, the man who raised her, was not her biological father. This revelation led to a mental disorder and severe depression. She ran away from home multiple times, isolated herself from friends, and even attempted ending her life. To protect her, the family decided to keep her at home under supervision. At this time, she was either cared for by her mother, Tim, or her 17-year-old half-sister, Dakota Wall. The house doors were kept locked, and everything was under control until the morning of July 20th, when her mother found she missing at 6:30 a.m. Tracy suspected something was wrong because Sidnee's room was in complete disarray, the dresser was overturned, and belongings were scattered everywhere. She called Dakota, who suggested Sidnee had run away again. However, Tracy's concern grew when she saw that Sidnee was not logged into social media since the previous evening, which was unusual. Upon inspecting the room, she noticed all of Sidnee's personal items were still there, including her purse, phone, shoes, and clothes. It didn't seem like she had run away, it was as if she had left in her pajamas and without shoes. Tracy attempted to locate Sidnee but was unsuccessful. Sidnee's friends were also unaware of her whereabouts, so Tracy filed a missing Sidnee report with the police. The detectives were initially hesitant to take on this case. They knew Sidnee had problems, so they thought she just ran away from home again and would come back home later. Therefore, investigators shelved Tracy's testimony and only her relatives and friends participated in the search for her. They searched but in vain. A week later, on July 25, 2010, her body was discovered underwater. Her mother, Tracy, was summoned to the police station to identify her. Tracy immediately recognized her daughter's jewelry and confirmed a belly piercing. Dental records definitively identified the body as Sidnee's. Once the body is identified, police need to determine what happened to her. The autopsy revealed shocking details, that is, Sidnee was murdered. Forensic experts found evidence of multiple injuries, including gunshot wounds and signs of a violent death. This thing stunned everyone. They could not understand why the suspect could target the young girl in such a brutal way. The day before Sidnee disappeared, she had planned to go on a hike with her friends, but her mother did not allow it, which made her very sad. She spent the entire day alone under house arrest. When police investigated the house, they found no signs of a break-in. The doors were always kept closed, suggesting that either a family member let the kidnappers in, or they had a key. The relatives insisted they didn't give keys to any strangers. At the time of the incident, only Tracy and Dakota were in the house. The police began questioning the closest relatives, friends, and Sidnee's acquaintance, as those close to the victim are often involved in such crimes. Due to the violent nature of the crime, the investigators suspected a personal motive. Tracy reported coming home around 10 p.m. At that time, Sidnee was in one room watching TV. Tracy had taken prescribed medication to sleep in her room. Tim was not home that night, he was on a business trip. The most scrutinized individuals were Sidnee's sister, Dakota, and her boyfriend, Chad Bennett, who is 20 years old. They both denied any connection to the crime. Dakota stated that she saw Chad the day before, when he visited her to watch a movie, after which he went to work. Chad confirmed her account. However, detectives were suspicious of Chad because he had a criminal record, which included possession of illegal substances and petty theft. As a result, the police brought in his accomplices for questioning: Carl Dane, 18, James Glazier, 17, and Robbie Mueller, 15. All three were friends with Dakota, the old sister of Sidnee. During questioning, the young men were evasive and inconsistent in their statements. Ultimately, they told a similar story but with different details. According to their accounts, on the night of July 19, 2010, Carl, James, and Robbie went to Sidnee's house. They had a brutal plan as part of their group ceremony, which required performing an evil deed. The plan was to kill Sidnee's mother, Tracy, without leaving any evidence. However, as they were moving around house, Sidnee woke up, stepped into the hallway, and called for her mother. The attackers stopped her in time, preventing her from making any noise. They held her mouth and nose so tightly that she lost consciousness. Then, they decide that killing Sidnee is enough for their initiation ceremony and they choose not to harm Tracy. They carried her body to the car, but she regained consciousness. They continued to torture, beat, and strangle her until she passed out again. They then disposed of her by dumping her into the water, tying a concrete block to her body so it would sink and so that no one can find the body. However, this plan backfired because, during decomposition, gases are formed, causing the body to eventually float. All three individuals, Carl, James, and Robbie, were arrested on July 28. Their story seemed highly implausible. They initially intended to kill Tracy, but instead killed Sidnee. Something was evidently amiss. The police suspected that, besides this heinous crime, they might have raped she, as her trousers were down when the body was discovered. However, none of the suspects admitted to this act. The body's condition was poor because the water had erased all evidence, so the police can't confirm this. About the lowered trousers, they denied rape, they suggesting it was related to the influence of illegal substances. Law enforcement knew that gangs have a hierarchy and strict discipline. Although Chad, the leader, denied his guilt, it was inevitable that he was involved in this crime. In fact, the attack could only have been carried out with his approval, especially since he could not avoid participating in the initiation everyone was talking about. It was known that Sidnee had gunshot wounds, but members of Chad's team chose not to mention it, resulting in their statements being unreliable. Sidnee was shot with a .22 caliber pistol. Carl, a member of Chad's group, who had once met Sidnee, possessed a .22 caliber Ruger pistol. This weapon was quite costly, and Carl claimed he couldn't afford it, saying Chad had given it to him. Under the pressure of skilled police questioning, members of Chad's team admitted that he directed their actions. They agreed to testify against he, even though he continued to deny any involvement in the crime. Consequently, Chad was also arrested, though the police suspected there were more people involved in Sidnee's murder. They believed Dakota might have been part of it, but she continued to deny any involvement, asserting that she loved her sister and they had a good relationship. Detectives continued their investigation after noticing many inconsistencies in the story. When speaking with the Sidnee family's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that Dakota actually despised Sidnee. She usually tries to join Dakota in group activities, which annoyed the group, especially Dakota. Dakota wants to spend more time with her boyfriend, Chad, instead of with her. However, Dakota was responsible for looking after she while their parents were at work and also have to clean and do other housework. Dakota couldn't get rid of Sidnee, so she had to put up with it. At Sidnee's funeral, Dakota appeared happy during the service. She smiled casually and chatted cheerfully with everyone who came to pay their respects. She seemed unaffected by her younger sister's passing. Police followed Dakota and they later questioned her for several hours. The detectives intentionally confused her with unexpected questions to catch her in a lie. Eventually, she began to disclose some details. She admitted that during a trip to another city, Nashville, she overheard her friends from the group discussing what had happened. This was on July 21st. Just 2 days after Sidnee disappeared. She said 2 members of the group, James and Carl, were talking about the murder. At first, she thought they were referring to someone else since Sidnee's body had not yet been found, but then she realized they were speaking about her 15-year-old sister, Sidnee. They discussed how they beat, strangled, and drowned Sidnee, then tying body to a concrete block. Dakota began her story by explaining that on July 23rd, she was with Chad's group at Carl's house, where she overheard a conversation about the murder. Carl mentioned having a gun and he shot someone with that gun. Under police pressure, Dakota disclosed more details, admitting that she knew who was in a car parked near the house on the night Sidnee disappeared. These individuals were members of Chad's group. They entered the house and did something to Sidnee. She confessed this to the officer, but explained that she had been too afraid of they to speak up earlier. However, Dakota's account was becoming inconsistent. In her new testimony, she alleged that Carl had threatened her life if she informed the police. The officers noted her lack of emotion and how careful she was in giving her testimony. Investigators knew that she seemed pleased about Sidnee's death, casting doubt on her innocence. To probe further, the police pretended to know everything about the crime, including Dakota's relevance, but claimed they were unclear about the motive. This unsettled she, yet she did not confess to any wrongdoing. The case garnered public attention. They intensely discussed the shocking crime. Rumors circulated widely, including one claiming that Dakota discovered Sidnee's diary a few days before the crime, revealing that Sidnee had slept with her boyfriend, Chad, 2 years earlier. It is important to mention that 2 years earlier, Dakota had not met Chad, yet this might have infuriated her as Sidnee's older sister. However, the romantic relationship, especially between Sidnee and Chad, was never verified and was doubtful to investigators since Sidnee was only 13 at the time. Although this motive wasn't confirmed, there were several other possible reasons for the murder. The following day, Dakota was called in for questioning again. She alleged that her boyfriend, Chad, who was accused of the crime, had shown disturbing behavior. He was aggressive and often lost control, attacking people frequently. It seems that he cannot avoid committing a serious crime. He had a conflict with Sidnee's ex-boyfriend, Bubby. According to Chad's testimony, he heard voices urging him to attack his family. He even set their house on fire. He also allegedly shot his favorite cat, hitting it with 15 bullets. None of these claims were verified. Detectives also knew that at 10 p.m. on the night of Sidnee's disappearance, Dakota called he. It's believed that the group members arrived at her house then, possibly asking Dakota to open the door or planning something before the attack. Dakota did not answer the police's questions about Sidnee's murder, and it seems she is deliberately trying to mislead the investigation. As a result, she was arrested for obstruction of justice. However, at that time, the police did not have enough evidence to proceed with a trial. Chad admitted to being the leader of a gang called the City Saints, whose members followed his orders without question. This thing might have endangered Sidnee's life. Chad, however, insisted that he never ordered the murder of Sidnee and denied any involvement, even expressing regret over the incident. Meanwhile, Carl participated in interrogations for 2 days as the prosecution prepared for the trial. He recounted that on the night of Sidnee's disappearance, he had been drinking at night. Then, Robbie, also drunk, came to see him and suggested going somewhere. Carl agreed without asking for details and to feel secure and took a .22 caliber pistol with him. Carl was very emotional during the interrogation and openly cried. This made the detectives question whether he was an accomplice to a terrible murder or no. It was possible that he went for a walk without knowing Robbie planned to kill Sidnee. However, the police were skeptical about his tears, as they could be a sign of remorse or a disguise. Carl stated that they picked up James on the way and drove to the Sidnee family's house. Robbie climbed over the fence and entered the house while everyone was asleep and Carl waiting outside in the car. After some time, he became worried because they were taking too long. He claimed he went inside to find his friends and leave together. The door from the courtyard was open, providing direct access to the basement where Sidnee lived. The police were suspicious that the door might have been unlocked at night, especially since there were no signs of forced entry. It seemed likely that someone helped the criminals approach Sidnee unnoticed. Suspicion falls on her sister, Dakota. Carl explained that when they entered the property, they noticed that Sidnee had woken up due to the noise. She recognized both criminals, Robbie and James. She asked what they were doing here. Then, she tried to wake her mother and call for help. However, Robbie attacked although she resisted, but they overpowered her. He threw her onto the couch and tied her hands, but she fought back fiercely. He then pointed a gun at her. Likely due to the shock and injuries from the struggle, so she lost consciousness. They were aware of her mental health challenges and her history of running away from home, so they decided to make it look like she had run away again. They removed from the house through the open door, dragged her to their car, and drove off with her to ensure she wouldn't be found. Halfway through the journey, Sidnee regained consciousness and began to resist desperately. Immediately after that, one of the attackers forced her to the ground and strangled her. He kept her in that position for a long time, until she passed out again. They then took to a river by car, but she regained consciousness again midway. During this time, they claimed that she expressed a desire for intimacy, and they had had intimate relations with her. And the strangulation may have been part of a perverted game. Subsequently, Sidnee was shot in anger and thrown into the water. However, this testimony of incident was met with disbelief. It was obvious that the intimate intercourse was not of her own volition. Robbie presented a different account to the police. He stated that Carl played a significant role in torturing the girl. Carl had previously been in a brief 3-day relationship with but then she broke up with him because he didn't care about her, after which she began seeing someone else. Afterward, he vowed to take revenge on all the girls who betrayed him, starting with Sidnee. At that time, no one expected his anger to lead things so far. Robbie, the youngest in the group, at just 15, insisted that he hadn't harmed anyone. As a new member, he simply followed the others and did what they told him, staying within the boundaries of what was allowed. On October 5, 2012, Chad's group members disclosed new information about the case. The police finally gathered enough evidence to build a full case and charge the group members. That day, they questioned Dakota to understand how the door to Sidnee's room could have been left open at night. It's known that due to her mental illness, she could pose a danger to herself. Her mother ensured that she couldn't leave by keeping the door always locked. Sidnee was under house arrest during all of this. It became evident that the incident was neither accidental nor mistaken because her mother and Dakota were meant to supervise every evening. During questioning, the police were able to get Dakota to confess. She admitted she left the door open, intending to play a prank on her sister, coordinated with members of the group. Finally, the police obtained this long-hidden confession. Later, Dakota disclosed another crucial detail. Before the crime, she had a meeting with Chad's team members, where they discussed their plans. She admitted they intended to kill Sidnee. With this information, everything became clear. Even if Dakota didn't directly participate in the murder of Sidnee, she was aware of it and did nothing to prevent it. She knew what was going to happen, so leaving the door unlocked wasn't accidental. She planned it to allow the attackers to enter the house and killed Sidnee. Investigators believe Dakota underwent a brutal ordeal to join Chad's group, which explained her aided the killers. Her cheerful behavior at her younger sister's funeral was because she completed the ritual to join the group and get rid of her annoying younger sister. Then, their group celebrated after the murder. Carl later acknowledged his guilt, writing an apology letter to Sidnee's mother, Tracy, on August 18, 2010. He admitted that he had done evil and now had to pay with his freedom. Even though he knew that it couldn't bring Sidnee back to life, but he asked for forgiveness. Tracy read the letter and believed Carl showed no remorse. Although he was arrested early in the investigation, it took 2 years for them to appear in court. Carl Dane pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received the 60-year prison sentence. However, before being transferred to a federal prison, he was discovered dead in his cell, with a note expressing regret for his actions. Another member of the group, James, was also found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years. Robbie Mueller initially sentenced to 37 years, but his sentence was reduced to 26 years after an appeal. He will be eligible for parole in late 2023. The gang leader, Chad Bennett, cooperated with investigators and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, resulting in a 20-year sentence. He took a plea deal and will be eligible for parole in 2026. Dakota received a 26-year prison sentence, with the ability to apply for first parole by the end of 2023. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda lived with her family in New Chapel Hill, about 100 miles from Dallas. It's a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people. She grew up to be a bright and ambitious young woman, graduating with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. Amanda is an employee of Trinity Mother Francis and a student at Tyler Junior College, majoring in English literature. She was an aspiring writer, a lover of words, music, and life. But on September 15, 2010, Amanda's family had to face frightening events. Amanda's lifeless body was discovered at her family's home in New Chapel Hill. She was found by her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson. Nate had just returned home from a jog in the woods. He called 911 and explained the situation to the police. Nate said he went out for a run because he was stressed about homework. When he came back, he found the door to the house open, which was very unusual. He first checked his room, then Amanda's room, and that's when he saw his sister lying on the floor, unresponsive. The police asked Nate to clarify which door was open, and he explained that people usually entered the house through the garage door. Nate was very emotional, and the police tried to calm him down. When asked if he touched anything in the house, Nate replied that he did not. During the 911 call, Nate told the police that he had discovered the body of his sister Amanda. When asked if Amanda had been shot, Nate replied that she had multiple bullet holes in her head. When the police arrived on the scene, Nate told the same story. Further investigation by a criminologist revealed that Amanda had been sitting up in bed when she was shot, then she fell to the floor. Notably, there was no sign of a gun or shell casing at the crime scene, suggesting that the perpetrator may have taken the weapon with him when he left. Or may have used a revolver, which does not fire a shell casing. Amanda's parents were devastated and could not understand what had led to this tragic event. Being deeply religious people, they found it difficult to understand who could be capable of such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was a kind person who did not want to harm others and had no enemies. Police began canvassing the neighborhood where the crime occurred to gather more information about Amanda and her family. In interviews, a nearby resident said that Amanda Anderson's family was happy and very religious. A neighbor offered a possible explanation for Amanda's death. He said that the area was generally quiet and low crime, but that about 2 weeks before Amanda died, a nearby home had been robbed. It was possible that the perpetrator of that robbery was also involved in Amanda's death. Perhaps the perpetrator saw Nate Anderson out for a run, broke into the home, and then shot Amanda when she discovered them. To explore this theory, police needed to find evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. When the police asked the family to check for any missing valuables, Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. Although there were valuables such as jewelry and a laptop in Amanda's room, nothing was missing. Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. This surprising discovery made the police question the motive behind the crime. If the intention of the criminals was to steal, why did they shoot Amanda multiple times after seeing her? The lack of stolen items proved that this was not a robbery. The police began to look into other motives. The forensic team searched the entire house, not just Amanda's room, for evidence. They collected fingerprints and hair, hoping to find samples left by someone outside the household. Additional evidence was collected from Nate, the person who first discovered Amanda's body. His clothing was taken to be examined for potential connections to the crime scene. Initially, Nate's clothing did not appear to be important to the police investigation because it did not contain any visible blood. However, as part of standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects, police sent Nate's clothing to a lab for further analysis, along with other collected evidence. Meanwhile, the police asked Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, to reveal the location of all the firearms in the house. As it turned out, the Andersons possessed an extensive collection of guns, which was not unusual for a family in Texas. They didn't actively hunt but occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark's lead, the police discovered weapons and seized more than 10 different types of pistols and rifles, as well as several revolvers. Their informants also did not provide any clues, leaving the police without a clear lead. The police did not have many clues to identify the culprit. On September 17, 2010, the police obtained the autopsy results 2 days after Amanda's death. The report revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, all in the head. What's striking is that any one of these shots would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator fired 3 additional times. The bullet wounds locations on Amanda's head were also peculiar. The shots were fired from a small caliber pistol. 2 wounds were located on the top of her head, one near the right temple, and the last one on her forehead. Except for the shot to the right temple, which was fired at a 90-degree angle, all shots were directed from top to bottom. The nature of these wounds suggests that Amanda's death was more like an execution. The crime scene revealed that .22 caliber bullets were used in the shooting. The lack of gunpowder marks around Amanda's head wounds suggested the shooter was at least a yard away. Based on forensic evidence, police concluded that Amanda knew her killer. 2 key factors led to this conclusion. Amanda was sitting on her bed, working on her laptop, when she was shot, and the shooter was standing beside her. It's likely that if a stranger had entered her room, Amanda would have reacted defensively. However, she took no action, indicating she was familiar with the shooter and didn't perceive them as a threat. The police sought to identify the killer among Amanda's acquaintances by questioning her friends at college. Her best friend revealed that Amanda was cautious and didn't engage with strangers or use unknown substances. Amanda was not involved in any illegal activities. She also had no enemies at college. However, It is possible that someone was secretly following Amanda and planning an attack. In an attempt to find leads, police spoke with college security about any suspicious incidents related to Amanda or other students over the past year. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. A week after Amanda's death, police have found no leads and have not identified any suspects. Amanda's family grieves, and they are desperate for answers about what happened. In an effort to gather more information, a reward was offered to anyone who could provide helpful leads to the investigation. The goal was to encourage someone with valuable information to come forward. The police station soon received numerous calls with tips, but most of them were unsubstantiated assumptions that only hindered the investigation. Despite the time-consuming process of verifying each lead, none of them yielded the desired outcome. Ultimately, every tip led to a dead end. The police decided to re-question the Amanda family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of her wounds suggested a personal motive. Amanda's mother was baffled by the crime, describing her daughter as a devout churchgoer and excellent student who was kind to everyone. She revealed that Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, but had been dating a friend her age for about a year. However, the relationship had ended, and as far as her mother knew, they had not seen each other since. Police were looking for Amanda's ex-boyfriend to investigate the nature of their relationship and determine whether he had any ulterior motive for harming her. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported that he and Amanda attended some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never dated. They spent time together on a few occasions, however, their interactions were normal. When asked about his last encounter with Amanda, he said that he saw her the day before she died. According to him, she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This information was not valuable. Therefore, the police decided to review the case from the beginning. The police started with Nate's 911 call. During the conversation, Nate mentioned that he did not go into his sister's room and said that someone had shot Amanda. When asked if Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound, Nate replied that there was more than one wound, specifically mentioning multiple shots to her head. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they did not immediately find evidence of multiple gunshot wounds, despite their experience in such cases. Furthermore, no gun casings or bullet casings were found at the scene. This raised questions about how Nate knew his sister had been shot multiple times. Investigators concluded that it was impossible for anyone standing at the door to know that Amanda had been shot in the head, let alone the exact number of times. The police returned to Amanda's house and inspected the door that Nate said had been propped open when he arrived. Although they found some scratches, the lock showed no signs of damage. This suggested that the scene may have been staged. After the crime lab examined the weapons seized from the home, the officers believed that a .22 caliber handgun may have been used to shoot Amanda. Analyzing all the available information, the officers came to a shocking conclusion. It appeared that Amanda had died at the hands of a family member. The pistol had been hidden in a safe place, and the killer knew where it was. Furthermore, the person who shot Amanda later returned the gun to its original location. Amanda's parents were not home on the night of the murder. Her father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. Only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother, Nate, were home. Therefore, all the initial evidence pointed to Nate as the prime suspect. However, the police did not understand the motive behind the crime, especially why Nate used their father's gun to harm his sister. To gain a better understanding of the events, the police took a closer look at what happened that evening. According to Mark Anderson, he had called his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received the call from Nate, who was crying and claimed that someone had shot him. What the police found surprising was that Nate had called his father before dialing 911. The police needed concrete evidence before they could file any charges. Their goal was to avoid causing further heartache to Amanda and Nate's parents. the police decided to speak with Mark Anderson without directly accusing their son. However, Nate's parents soon realized that the police suspected their son. In an effort to gather more information, the police asked Mark if Nate had recently used a .22 caliber pistol. Mark revealed that he had given the pistol to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, after which Nate had used it in the backyard for shooting practice. A subsequent search of Amanda's home led the police to the discovery of several .22 caliber shell casings in the backyard. While these casings matched the bullets found in Amanda's body, it was still possible that this was just a coincidence. More evidence was needed to establish a definitive connection. However, 2 weeks after Amanda's death, Nate's clothes, which he had been wearing when he found his sister dead, were sent to a lab for testing with luminol. The chemical reaction showed traces of blood on his clothes. A blood spatter expert concluded that Nate Anderson had either been in the room when the shooting occurred or that he had fired the fatal shots. Tests confirmed that Nate's clothes had his sister's blood on them. This raised many questions, as Nate and Amanda were known to be close and affectionate siblings. Their parents described their relationship as loving, and family photos showed the siblings getting along well. On November 10, 2010, police got a warrant for Nate Anderson. They found him in the church and arrested him for murder. Everyone familiar with the case was shocked. No one could believe that Nate would do such a thing. The trial began on October 24, 2011. It was a long and emotional road for many, especially Amanda's family. Despite the evidence against the young teen, family members vowed to stand by Nate. Nate's grandmother said that Nate knew nothing but church, school, and love, and that Nate would never hurt his sister for any reason in the world. Amanda's parents struggled to accept that their son was responsible for Amanda's death. Nate was tried as an adult. An examiner for Nate said it would be best for him to remain in juvenile court, but the judge disagreed. For the first time, the state revealed some of the evidence police found in Amanda's home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors claimed that Nate's computer showed a history of repeated visits to adult websites and drawings of violent scenes. Additionally, one of the text messages on Amanda's phone said Nate should be shot. Her friend asked, "For what?" She replied, "For putting big staples in Amanda's head and never helping around the house." Nate Anderson eventually pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime in February 2012 as part of a plea deal. Prior to his guilty plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and then to his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. According to a statement released by the parents, Nate told them that he shot Amanda with a handgun found in their home. Mark Anderson, Nate's father, stated that Nate begged for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, Nate's mother, expressed the pain she faced. Was a loving mother to both of her children. As a result of the plea agreement, Nate was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believed that entering into a plea agreement was in Nate's best interests, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie, a 22-year-old woman, was known for her outgoing personality, intelligence, and vibrancy. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, she was the eldest of 3 siblings. Katie is Jean's special daughter, admired for her intelligence and charming personality that attracts everyone. Katie graduated from New Mexico State University with a business degree and had plans to start her MBA program in the fall. To support herself, she worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, Katie met Joe Bischoff and they quickly formed a close bond. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romance. Katie shared her happiness with her mother, Jean, expressing her hopes of building a life with Joe. Months later, Katie's dream became a possibility when Joe proposed to her with a diamond ring. However, after Katie and Joe graduated in the summer of 2003, they faced challenges in their relationship. Katie decided to stay at the university to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city about 350 miles away from Las Cruces. This distance put it difficult on their relationship. Despite this, Katie and Joe made an effort to stay in touch and meet whenever possible. On Labor Day weekend in 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces and spent time with Katie. However, their weekend together turned into a tragedy. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie had fun with Joe and their friends, going from bar to bar and eventually ending up at a local house party. After the party, Katie vanished. The following day, August 31st, 2003, Katie's mother, Jean, received a phone call. This changed her life forever. Recounting that day, Jean described it as follows: she had been preparing for a Labor Day weekend cookout with her family and friends when the phone rang at 2:15 afternoon, bringing news that would shatter her world. The caller asked, "Have you talked to Katie today?" The phone call was from Katie's roommate, Veronica, who had been searching for her and had already contacted Katie's friends and local hospitals without finding any sign of her. Jean was informed by Veronica that Katie had left the party by herself the night before. Veronica and Joe had fallen asleep at the party location, assuming Katie had returned home. However, when they woke up in the morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Her family immediately contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a passerby discovered a half-naked woman's body near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers arriving at the scene concluded that the body had likely been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the victim's death was no accident. The victim, estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, had been stripped of clothing from the waist down. Examination of the body revealed self-defense wounds on her arms, indicating she had put up a fight and scratched her attacker. The police found skin particles under her fingernails, providing them with the perpetrator's DNA. Strangulation marks were visible on her neck, initially suggesting it as the cause of death. The investigators concluded that the young woman did not die at the remote desert landfill where her body was found, as there were no signs of a struggle near the scene. Instead, it appears her body was moved there in an attempt to delay the search. A disturbing detect on the victim's body revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting that the perpetrator had tried to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting it on fire. The police quickly made a connection between Katie's disappearance and the discovery of a young woman's body. Katie's father was called to the morgue to identify the body. Katie's mother, Jean, said that the young woman's body was their daughter's. Jean struggled to put into words the immense pain and agony they were enduring. As if they were falling into a deep, dark abyss with no way out, leaving them with no sense of tomorrow or any remaining joy. Katie's father shared that when they lifted the sheet, revealing his daughter's bruised and disfigured face, he was deeply saddened. The residents of once peaceful Las Cruces were shaken by the horrific incident. The police were determined to find the perpetrator as soon as possible, aware that there was no guarantee the person wouldn't commit another crime. The investigation into Katie's case began with a thorough examination of her final hours. The police aimed to piece together her last moments, where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, and if she had any conflicts or enemies. Since the party was about a mile from Katie's home, investigating whether she made it back safely was a priority. To start, the investigators spoke with Veronica, Katie's roommate, and Joe. The detectives found it suspicious that these two stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, stating that Katie had departed, leaving her purse, phone, and keys behind. The investigation team then focused on retracing Katie's route home, going door to door to interview residents, hoping for any leads. Unfortunately, no one saw or heard anything that could help the investigation. Investigations revealed a crucial detect. Katie likely returned to her house but failed to enter it. Notably, she had left her keys behind. Upon searching the house, the investigator found Katie's shoes beside her bedroom window. It appears she attempted to enter through the window but was ambushed. Footprints in the gravel nearby supported this theory. A violent struggle ensued, but sadly, Katie's attacker overpowered her. Further investigation led the authorities to believe that the perpetrator disposed of Katie's body at a desert landfill, attempting to conceal evidence by setting it on fire. The central question remained: was the attacker a stranger or someone Katie trusted? With around 40 party attendees, there was a strong possibility the killer was an acquaintance. Could the perpetrator have been Katie's boyfriend, Joe? This led investigators to interview partygoers, unearthing a critical detail Joe did not mention. Several witnesses reported that Katie saw Joe kissing another girl, which sparked a heated argument between the couple. In her state of anger, Katie hastily left the party alone, forgetting her purse. When questioned by police, Joe neglected to disclose this crucial information. He also did not inform Katie's parents about the incident, despite their curiosity about why Katie had left the party by herself. The investigators questioned Joe again about his whereabouts on the night of Katie's murder. They had discovered that he and Katie had a fight earlier that evening after she saw him kissing another girl. Joe acknowledged the argument and explained that he followed Katie home but did not enter her house. He claimed he saw her bedroom light was off and assumed she was asleep, so he returned to the party. However, the new information sparked suspicion because it indicated Joe was not at the party when the attack occurred, and none of the partygoers could confirm when he returned. During further interviews with party attendees, investigators found another peculiar detail. When he returned to the party, Joe called Katie. Then Joe heard the phone ring, and he realized that she had left her phone at the party. Despite this, Joe continued to phone her until morning. Was he trying to create an alibi or pretend to be concerned about Katie's well-being? Investigators asked Joe to clarify his actions, but he refused to cooperate with them any. Katie loved Joe very much, but he didn't even come to her funeral, which aroused even greater suspicion. Investigators decided to test his DNA. They had collected DNA evidence from Katie's body, mostly under her fingernails, where they found human skin cells. The sample's DNA all belonged to one person. The police needed to compare his DNA to the DNA found on Katie's body. But there were problems with that. Joe was out of town, and his lawyer informed the investigators that Joe refused to provide a DNA sample. The police suspected that Joe was involved in Katie's death, given his suspicious behavior. To confirm that, they needed to find a legitimate way to obtain Joe DNA. However, this took time, and in the meantime, they searched other possible explanations. They investigated similar cases to determine if Katie was the victim of a serial offender. The DNA found on her body was matched against a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators decided to revisit the party where Katie was last seen. They identified the male attendees and asked for their DNA samples, which they all willingly provided. However, none of their DNA matched the samples found on Katie's body, leading the investigators to focus on Joe again. Notably, Joe was the only person who had refused to provide a DNA sample, but the investigators found an alternative method to obtain Joe's DNA sample. Katie and Joe spent time in her bedroom before attending the party, engaging in intimate contact. The police visited Katie's house and collected the bed sheet, hoping to find Joe's DNA. Their efforts were successful, and the lab discovered a sample of male DNA on the sheet. However, the DNA did not match the sample found on Katie's body, indicating that Joe was not the suspect. This discovery raised further questions about Joe's behavior, as he had refused to cooperate with the police despite not being involved in the attack on his girlfriend. The police sent the test results to Joe's lawyer, informing them that he had been cleared as a suspect. Joe agreed to talk to the police again and provided a DNA sample. The results supported the initial findings. Joe was not involved in Katie's crime. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he was worried that his DNA would be found on her body. The mystery surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unsolved for the police and Katie's family. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police explored alternative theories. Party attendees informed investigators that Katie was wearing rings, including the one given by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed that the killer removed the rings from Katie's fingers. They searched local pawn shops but did not find Katie's rings. The discovery of specific tire tracks near where Katie's body was found provided another new lead. Experts identified the tire brand and model, and the manufacturer informed the police that these tires were most commonly used on pickup trucks. Unfortunately, this information did not help identify the culprit, and the case hit a dead end. A year after Katie's attack, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. A girl in Green Bay was assaulted, set on fire, and left for dead. However, the victim somehow managed to survive by pretending to be dead. Once her attackers left, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. The survivor described her attackers to the police as two Hispanic men. The police created sketches based on her description and released them to the public. A local farmer recognized the men in the sketches as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Los Cruces, and he often visited them. Both men were arrested. As a result, the police were able to apprehend both suspects. Initially, investigators thought they had identified Katie's attacker, but the DNA test results contradicted this conclusion. The sample's DNA did not match the DNA found on Katie's body. Although Gregorio Morales and Juan were later convicted of assaulting the girl in Green Bay, they were not linked to Katie's case. Gregorio Morales and Juan were sentenced to 50 and 70 years in prison, respectively. The only leads the police had to go on were the tire tracks from the crime scene and the DNA samples of the perpetrator. Katie's family was hopeful that these DNA samples would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life. Unfortunately, there were complications with the DNA evidence. At that time, police were not mandated to collect DNA samples from individuals when they were arrested. Katie's mother was shocked and devastated by the loss of her daughter to a violent man. The family's main concern is to find out the identity of the perpetrator, understand the motive behind this terrible crime, and most importantly, that the killer is held accountable and no longer poses a threat to others. The lead detective gives an update on the case, saying that aside from DNA evidence, they currently lack concrete other leads to investigate further. Katie had fought hard for her life, which resulted in her killer's blood and skin being found under her fingernails. This had allowed investigators to create a DNA profile. Detectives uploaded the DNA into CODIS, the National Forensic Database, and then checked it against the offender database on a weekly basis to see if there was a match. Although they had the killer's identity through the DNA profile, the police needed to find the matching individual in their database to make an identification. Katie's family felt hopeful, they knowing the police would eventually match the DNA to a suspect, bringing them closer to justice for their daughter's tragic death. Katie's murder case saw a major breakthrough 3.5 years later. On December 18, 2006, the lab found a DNA sample that matched the DNA found on Katie's body. The perpetrator was identified as 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married man of 2. He has a very long previous criminal record and had been released from prison shortly before Katie's death. On November 13, 2003, Gabriel Avila was apprehended by authorities after breaking into an apartment, armed with a knife. Fortunately, two young women inside the apartment managed to evade his attack by quickly locking themselves in the bathroom and dialing 911 for emergency assistance. He was convicted of aggravated burglary in March 2004, but released on bond. A flaw in the system caused a significant delay, and it wasn't until 3.5 years later that investigators were able to link him to Katie's death. Gabriel Avila managed to evade police for nearly a year. Then, he being apprehended in November 2004, based on a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence. While in prison, Gabriel Avila provided a DNA sample, but it took 2 more years to be tested. Once the results showed a partial match with the DNA from Katie's crime scene, investigators quickly jumped into action. They found the truck Gabriel Avila used to dispose of Katie's body and discovered a ring belonging to her in the center console. In 2006, after finding a ring belonging to Katie in Gabriel Avila's truck, detectives investigating Katie's case visited his in prison. Gabriel Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that while his wife was away, he was in the area to buy illicit substances. He claimed that he approached Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later that night, Gabriel Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He stopped and offered her assistance, and that Katie told him she was locked out without her purse. Gabriel Avila attempted to help her, but he then attacked and began undressing Katie. What followed was a violent assault. After the assault, Gabriel Avila panicked and decided to strangle Katie out of fear that she would identify him. Despite Katie putting up a brief struggle, Gabriel Avila restrained her, unable to let go, ultimately leading to her death. Gabriel Avila claimed he put Katie in his pickup truck and drove her to a desert landfill, where he left her body on the ground. He attempted to burn the body, thinking it would eliminate evidence. But this effort was unsuccessful. A new DNA sample from Gabriel Avila matched the DNA found at the scene. When authorities found DNA on Katie's body in 2003, her parents were optimistic that it would help quickly find a suspect. However, at the time, there was a significant gap in the law. In New Mexico and most states, it was illegal to take DNA when someone was arrested. DNA could only be collected from individuals who had been convicted of a crime and sent to prison. This meant that the DNA on Katie's body couldn't initially be matched. The trial of Gabriel Avila, who was accused of the crime, began in 2017. Gabriel Avila apologized to Katie's family during the trial. His lawyer asked the judge to consider showing leniency, emphasizing that Gabriel Avila was genuinely remorseful for his actions. In contrast, District Attorney Susana Martinez countered that it took Gabriel Avila more than 3 years to confess to the crimes, and he only did so after detectives presented him with DNA evidence. At the sentencing, David, Katie's father, pleaded with the judge to hand down a severe punishment. He stressed that because Katie would never have another opportunity in life, it was only fair that her killer should not be given a chance to be free again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. After serving 30 years, he will be eligible for parole around 2043. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, United States. She grew up in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Known for her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced adulthood early. At the age of 16, she became pregnant but was determined to be a good mother. Danielle's relationship with Carl, the father of her child, ended in divorce. In 1996, she gave birth to her son Tristan at the age of 17, and despite the difficulties ahead, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. Then she met Luis Payano, a man who would become Tristan's father. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers, initially as friends, but their relationship developed into love. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and for a time, it seemed like all their problems had been solved. The couple moved in together, and Danielle secured an office job at a landscaping company, a position she was proud to have obtained. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. Her life was on the right track, with a loving son, a fiancé, and promising career prospects. On March 15, 1999, Luis returned home from work to find his fiancée, 20-year-old Danielle Jennings, lying lifeless on the bed in their Ashley Lakes apartment in Norcross, Georgia. Their young son, Tristan, was at daycare at the time. Luis immediately realized Danielle was dead due to her skin color and called 911. When the police arrived, Luis was waiting for them and reported what he had found. He explained that upon entering the apartment, he saw Danielle lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered she was dead. The police naturally suspected Luis, and they took him in for questioning while a team of officers thoroughly examined the crime scene. Danielle was found lying on her back on the bed, fully clothed, with a sock around her neck. This suggested that the perpetrator intended to kill her, leaving no chance for survival. The fact that the stocking was tied at the back indicated that the perpetrator was behind Danielle when they strangled her. The crime scene showed signs of disarray, with the bed messed up and a dresser drawer open. It's possible that the perpetrator took the stocking from Danielle's drawer. The contents of her purse had been dumped and rummaged through, leading police to consider the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. However, several valuable items, including cameras and jewelry, were left untouched. This led police to speculate that the perpetrator may have intended to steal something but encountered Danielle and decided to kill her to avoid being identified as a witness. The lack of forced entry at the front door and the locked sliding glass door in the backyard raised suspicions that the crime scene might have been staged. Despite searching the surrounding area, police found no evidence. After investigating the crime scene, police discovered that Danielle may have let the killer into her home voluntarily or that the killer had a key to the apartment. As a result, the prime suspect became Danielle's fiancé, Luis Payano. When police started questioning Luis, he displayed intense emotions. The police were aware that romantic relationships can sometimes escalate into anger, leading to devastating consequences. To begin the interrogation, they asked Luis about his whereabouts on the day of Danielle's death. Luis claimed he spent the entire day at work. He last saw Danielle when they both left their apartment at 6:45 a.m., but she returned briefly to retrieve something. According to Luis, Danielle was anxious about an important meeting with management at work and seemed slightly distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to invite him to lunch, but he declined due to his heavy workload. Luis tried to contact Danielle later that day but couldn't reach her. Concerned, he called her co-workers, who told him she had gone out for lunch but failed to return to work. Luis then contacted their home, where he spoke to someone named Lise, who also hadn't heard from Danielle. Luis left work to check on Danielle at their home in the Ashley Lakes apartments. When he arrived, he found something unsettling. The front door was unlocked. Upon entering, he saw a jar on the floor. During the investigation into Danielle's death, police questioned Luis about his relationship with her. They asked if the couple had frequent arguments or domestic problems. Luis insisted that their relationship was good and that they loved each other very much. Clearly feeling confused, he became frustrated with the questioning, believing that the police were wasting their time by focusing on him. He insisted that they should find the real culprit, who was still at large. Police also spoke to Danielle's friends and family, all of whom sided with Luis. Luis and Danielle were madly in love and were planning their wedding. However, their happiness did not last long. During the investigation into Danielle's case, Luis's co-workers confirmed that he had been at work all day, providing him with a solid alibi and eliminating him as a suspect. During the interrogation, Luis said that Danielle's co-worker Jeff was showing her too much attention and she was unhappy about it. The police immediately went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss. Danielle's boss confirmed to the police that Danielle had complained about an employee named Jeff. Jeff was a middle-aged man who was a manager at the company. Danielle complained to her boss that Jeff was constantly hanging around her, interfering with her work, and behaving inappropriately. There was a significant age difference between Danielle and Jeff. He was 40 years old and she was 20. Jeff invited Danielle to lunch and Danielle told him that she had a fiancé. She refused to go to lunch with Jeff. The company where Danielle worked took her complaints seriously. On the day of her murder, she had a meeting regarding a complaint she had filed with management against Jeff. She was very nervous about it. She feared that her career might be in jeopardy because she was a new employee and Jeff was her manager. Her co-workers mentioned that Danielle had gone home for lunch after this meeting but had not returned. That gave the police a time frame for when Danielle's attack occurred. The investigation revealed Jeff's involvement, especially when it was discovered that he was absent from the office at the time of the crime and did not return until later in the evening. Police focused on Jeff as a suspect, possibly following Danielle home and attacking her when she opened the door, which would explain the lack of signs of entry. Jeff was called in for questioning and asked to describe his relationship with Danielle. He admitted that he invited her to lunch but denied his involvement in her death. Jeff didn't deny liking her, however, he claimed he had not behaved inappropriately towards Danielle and was surprised when she filed a complaint against him. The investigators asked him if Danielle's complaint was a reason for wanting to harm her. His first reaction to this question was anger. He was adamant that he wasn't the one who took her life. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have been the one who attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to him, he was with another colleague, and they were driving around the city solving some work issues. They had been together all day, so he couldn't be the one who took Danielle's life. Jeff told investigators the name of the co-worker whom he claimed he was with at the time of the crime. The detectives met with this man, and he confirmed Jeff's words, thus they excluded another person from the list of suspects. The next day, investigators received the autopsy report and examined it in the hope of getting some clues that would help them track down the perpetrator. The cause of Danielle's death was asphyxia. It seemed evident that Danielle's attack had taken her by surprise. The investigators concluded that someone had come up to her from behind and pulled the stocking tight until she lost consciousness. After that, the perpetrator tied the stocking in a knot so Danielle could not regain consciousness. There were no defensive injuries on her body. In fact, there were no injuries at all except for the ligature mark on her neck. Perhaps Danielle didn't even see the face of the one who attacked her. The police found no evidence at the crime scene that could help identify the perpetrator: no shoe prints, no DNA, no fingerprints, no hair. There was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Since the police had no new suspects, they returned to the version that what happened was a robbery that went wrong. They asked Luis to go through the apartment with them again. He carefully examined everything and said that nothing was missing from the apartment. All the things seemed to be in their usual places. However, a few days later, Lou called the police and said he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. He also drew the attention of investigators to another strange detail: the stocking that someone strangled Danielle with did not belong to her. According to Louise, she didn't wear stockings at all. It meant that whoever had done it had brought the stocking with them. Lacking any evidence, the investigators decided to look into Danielle's past. Perhaps what happened to her was connected with her past. They asked her friends about her previous relationships, in particular, her relationship with Carl, the father of her son Tristan. Her best friend told the police about Danielle's ex-boyfriend Eddie. She started dating him when she was already pregnant. Eddie was a violent guy, and as their relationship progressed, he became more domineering and tried to control all aspects of her life. It got to the point where he forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie deteriorated even more after Danielle gave birth to her son. Soon after, Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided it was time to end this relationship. She moved out and tried to start a new life, but Eddie had other plans. He did not accept rejection and behaved unpredictably. As a result, Danielle had to seek a restraining order against him. He violated it several times, called Danielle, parked near her house, and once even showed up at her work. Danielle's family told investigators that Eddie had called her several times in recent months. He told her to meet with him, but she always hung up. Eddie was the perfect suspect, so detectives tracked him down and brought him in for questioning. The man was hostile, and he wasn't eager to go to the police station. However, Eddie had an alibi. He said that Eddie was towing cars out of state at the time of the murder and that Eddie's boss, along with service logs and other receipts, could back him up. When the police confirmed his alibi, they released Eddie. 3 days after Danielle died, Danielle's neighbor, Kirk, called the police and told them about something that had happened to Kirk the week before the murder. Ms. Kirk said that recently in the apartment complex, residents often encounter a maintenance worker. The maintenance worker said he came to do a repair order. However, Ms. Kirk said that she felt very uncomfortable the whole time he was there because he kept staring at Kirk, as if he was more concerned with her than completing the repair order. The same thing happened to another woman. The maintenance worker insisted that he was there to change a light bulb, when the landlord said there were no bulbs to change. He mumbled and staggered, "Maybe I have the wrong apartment," then backed up and walked away. Police investigations revealed that the complex had several maintenance workers, but the one who matched the descriptions of both women was Calvin Oliver, 42. According to records, Calvin had only started working at the complex in September 1998. At the time of Danielle's murder, 10 residents had reported cash, checks, and other valuables, including jewelry, computers, and guns, missing from their apartments without evidence of forced entry. Some even suggested that someone on the maintenance staff was responsible. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by the police, who initially asked him about a series of burglaries at the Ashley Lakes apartments. Calvin denied any involvement in the burglaries. When asked about Danielle Jennings, he said he had heard about what happened to her but did not know her. The only thing he confessed was that he had worked in her apartment. The police were about to release Calvin for lack of concrete evidence when they ran a final check of Calvin's database. The results were horrifying. They discovered that Calvin had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear in court on a theft charge related to the theft of a personal check. According to Georgia Department of Correction records, Calvin had a long-standing adult criminal record dating back to 1974. His convictions included multiple residential burglaries, armed robbery, robbery by force, and at least one count of forcibly pressuring a woman into intimate contact at knife point. As a result, Calvin spent the majority of his life incarcerated. Given his extensive criminal history, it's surprising he was able to get a job at Ashley Lakes Apartments. The police took Calvin Oliver into custody, which allowed them to thoroughly investigate his potential involvement in Danielle Jennings's death. As part of their ongoing inquiry into a string of thefts at Ashley Lakes' apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. During the search, they discovered stolen items from other residents. And the police discovered Danielle's wedding ring in his home. This discovery directly linked Oliver to Danielle's death. When the police questioned him about the wedding ring, Calvin claimed that he had stolen it about 3 weeks before Danielle's death. However, this claim was proven false. Calvin became a suspect and refused to cooperate with police after being caught lying. At trial, the prosecution argued that Calvin killed Danielle after she caught him breaking into her home. After a 5-day trial that ended on October 13, 2000, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. As a result, Calvin Oliver received a life sentence for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for the burglary. A subsequent investigation revealed that Ashley Lake Apartments management knew about Calvin's history of run-ins with the law and his lengthy criminal record. Despite this knowledge, they failed to conduct thorough background checks and failed to warn other residents when a series of burglaries occurred. When these facts came to light, Danielle's family filed a lawsuit against Ashley Lake Apartments that they argue that the evidence demonstrates a reckless disregard for the safety of others. After a trial, a jury returned a verdict of more than $13 million for Danielle's wrongful death. The complex's key policy was also flawed, prosecutors said. Employees had access to house keys, and the lockboxes containing keys to the complex's 240 apartments were often left unsecured. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015 in the small town of Duncan, Oklahoma, USA. Her parents divorced and her father moved to Texas while Athena still lived with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite living far apart, her father kept in touch and visited her whenever possible. Sometimes her mother would bring Athena to see her father so they could spend time together. Both her parents remarried later and Athena had 2 younger sisters. Athena was a cheerful, sociable child. She loved to play and spend a lot of time outdoors. In the winter of 2022, when Athena was 7 years old, she temporarily left Oklahoma to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays ended. During this time, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's house was located in a remote rural area, surrounded by forests and vast fields. Here, Athena had a great time exploring nature with her father and also built a good relationship with his new wife, Elizabeth. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school at around 4:15 p.m., just like every other day. She was home alone with her mother, Elizabeth, because her father and grandfather had gone hunting. That evening, Athena had an argument with Elizabeth. Athena finally felt upset and decided to go to her own room. Meanwhile, Elizabeth went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. After about 20 minutes, Elizabeth went to Athena's room to call her to dinner, but she was gone. She started searching the whole house but couldn't find Athena anywhere. Elizabeth called a relative of her husband who lived nearby. Although Athena often visited the relatives, this time the relatives said that she was missing. Next, Elizabeth called her husband and told him about the situation. Her husband immediately asked her to contact the police and return home immediately. When she got home, Elizabeth called the 911 emergency number at around 6:40. Only 14 minutes later, the police arrived at her house. She explained the situation to the police and said that she thought Athena might have left home because of an argument between mother and child. Initially, the police seemed suspicious of Elizabeth because she had reported the child missing 40 minutes after discovering the incident. However, after listening to her description of the search around the house and contacting family members, they concluded that she might be telling the truth. The police immediately began searching the surrounding area. Although it was already dark, they still organized a search force within a radius of several kilometers around the house. They believed that the child might have gotten lost in the dark and needed urgent help. They focused on searching the entire area, including the woods and fields. Police also considered the possibility of kidnapping but found no evidence to support this theory. There was no sign of an intruder in the house and no strange noises or screams that night. Police received support from family and town residents in their efforts to find the missing Athena. The girl's mother quickly arrived at the scene after learning of her daughter's disappearance. But the results were still inconclusive as no trace of Athena was found. The search became more difficult, as the area around the house was quite difficult to access, especially at night. Therefore, the police continued the search at 7 a.m. the next morning with more police officers joining in. As news of the disappearance spread, hundreds of volunteers volunteered to join the search effort. Some came on horses and ATVs, while police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras to search for Athena. By the end of the day, Athena had still not been found. Police were concerned for her safety because of the cold weather at the beginning of winter. Although Texas is a small southern state, the temperature had dropped to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Since the girl was wearing thin clothes, it would be really difficult to endure such weather. On the third day, the search continued, and the police expanded the area to search for Athena. The police became increasingly suspicious that Athena had left the house on her own. During these days, they searched for miles in all directions, but they could not find the girl. The police identified the people who were near Athena's house that night. However, Athena's house was located in a special location, far from the main road, and there were no surveillance cameras in the area. However, they quickly got some important clues. A courier service had delivered to Athena's house that evening. The police contacted the courier company and learned that the delivery to the address was entrusted to an outside contractor. They then contacted that contractor and determined that the truck had arrived at Athena's house. Each of these trucks was equipped with surveillance cameras. So the police asked for footage from November 30th. After rewinding the time the truck arrived at the house, the police saw the driver dragging a girl who looked like Athena into the car. The police quickly identified the driver as Tanner Hearer, 31, and the police went to his address. Shortly thereafter, the man was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and taken in for questioning. As soon as the police mentioned the video evidence, Tanner began to speak. He explained that he had actually delivered a package to Athena's house that evening. While backing up the truck, he heard a crash and went to check what had happened. There, he saw the girl lying on the ground and realized that he had accidentally hit her with his car. As he approached, Tanner noticed that the girl was not seriously injured. She was conscious and spoke to him calmly. The girl said her name was Athena. He started to feel scared. He decided to take her into the truck and try to figure out how to solve the problem. The girl continued to talk to him and said that she would tell her father about this, and Tanner became more and more worried. He didn't know what to do with the situation, because he knew that if she told an adult about the incident, he could get into legal trouble. According to Tanner, he could not think of a better way than to kill her. He thought the best way would be to break her neck, but he could not do it. He then strangled Athena to death with his hands. He hid Athena's body in a nearby river. Tanner gave the police the exact location where he left Athena. So the police went there and found Athena's body. The murder shocked not only her family but also thousands of people across the country. All major media outlets reported the case and many were horrified by the brutality. After the body was found, Tanner was charged with kidnapping and murder. While waiting for the medical examiner's report, the police scrutinized Tanner's identity, trying to better understand his motives. Tanner's account of the events did not seem plausible. According to Tanner, he lightly hit the girl with his heart valve, causing no serious injuries to her. However, Tanner was so depressed that he immediately decided to kill her, thinking that beating a child would cost him his job. Tanner's story seems very strange. Police found out that this man was engaged and had a 1-year-old child. In addition to delivering goods, he occasionally worked as an Uber driver. Tanner's daily life, he participated in performing in a band at several cafes in the nearby city of Fort Worth. On social media, He often posted photos with his son, snapshots during music performances, and other moments of his daily life. These images do not show that he was a cruel person. There is no information about his previous criminal record before his arrest. Police also found no indication that he might be a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Athena's parents filed a lawsuit against FedEx and the contracting company, accusing them of allowing Tanner to work. They called for higher standards for employee screening to prevent such crimes in the future. Police investigators said the package Tanner delivered that evening was a Christmas gift Athena's parents had ordered for her. It was a Barbie doll she had long wanted. However, when the results of the medical examination were released, the case became more complicated. Experts said Athena died within an hour of being kidnapped. Her body had suffered various degrees of injury, and the primary cause of her death was asphyxiation. Police then outlined a series of events that could have led to the incident. After an argument with her mother, Athena decided to go outside and stand in the yard. At this time, Tanner arrived to make a delivery and found her alone. According to this theory, he saw an opportunity to satisfy his lust. The area around Athena's house was quite isolated, and the police believe that Tanner may have tricked or deliberately attacked Athena to get her into the car without encountering any resistance. It is still unclear what happened next. There are two main possibilities that seem most plausible. First, Tanner may have planned to take Athena out of the house to carry out his evil intentions, but the girl started screaming or tried to escape. Fearing discovery, Tanner killed the girl and dumped her body in the river. Second, Tanner may have committed some kind of harassment against Athena that did not involve direct contact. In this case, medical experts would not find evidence of sexual assault. To learn more, police spent weeks digging into Tanner's past. They spoke to his relatives, friends, and acquaintances, looking for any signs that he might have been involved in other criminal activities. There was a major breakthrough in the investigation. The police found several people who said they had been assaulted by Tanner when they were children. However, the identities of these people have not been released to protect the investigation. One of Tanner's victims went public with her story of being assaulted by him when she was 16. She shared her story on social media in an attempt to gain attention. Surprisingly, Tanner faced no consequences for his actions and was not even considered a suspect for a long time. Sadly, the victim wrote that no one believed her during those years. However, after Tanner killed Athena, these allegations received more attention, exposing Tanner's true nature. Now Tanner will also face separate trials for 4 sexual assaults involving minors. In preparation for the trial, the government announced that they would seek the death penalty. Tanner himself has hired a lawyer to advise him to withdraw his confession and declare his innocence, but this is unlikely to help him avoid punishment, as the police have video footage from the truck as well as Tanner's testimony about the exact location of the body. We can only watch the trial unfold and wait for more details to become public. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in the late 80s in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. Not much is known about her childhood except that she was the daughter of Eleanor Snodgrass, who lived in a cozy wooden house in Madison, Alabama. Shaninthia's childhood and youth passed as normal as any other girl of her time. Shanynthia was a young girl with curly brown hair, slim and beautiful. She was always surrounded by loyal friends and showed outstanding talent. Shanynthia was full of creative spirit, had a unique talent for songwriting and a passion for music. She expressed herself through singing and attracted the attention of the local people. In addition to singing, Shanynthia was fascinated by the world of fashion and photography. She had the ability to turn everyday moments into works of art in front of the camera. Despite her diverse interests, Shanynthia was a charitable woman who attended church regularly and took good care of her family. Everything in Shaninthia's life seemed to be preordained and promised a bright future. Shaninthia was 14 when she met Daryl Clayton through mutual friends. They quickly became friends and their relationship became more serious after graduating from high school, becoming an official couple. They spent a lot of time together and were considered serious and stable young people. However, their crime records had some questionable details. Both had minor crimes such as traffic violations and disorderly conduct on the street. In 2008, Daryl was charged with assaulting a woman, even though the act was unintentional. He faced severe punishment, but all charges were later dropped. Shaninthia and Daryl were not officially married but lived together. In 2008, they had a son named Dee. Shaninthia became a caring mother, taking care of not only her son but also Daryl's 2 children from a previous relationship. Daryl's mother, Sonia Clayton, considered Shaninthia a family member, not just her son's lover. However, their relationship did not last. Although the reason is unknown, they kept in touch after the breakup. For Daryl, Shaninthia was still a good wife and a caring mother. When her son Dee was only 2 years old, Shaninthia was involved in a small incident, possibly a parking ticket or a small argument. This was insignificant compared to what would happen in her future. Marrying Martin Gardner opened a new chapter in Shaninthia's life. This union brought joy and stability to her life. Shaninthia won Martin over with her kindness and love for her children, which was reflected in her gentleness and intelligence. Their love story developed rapidly. In September 2013, they decided to live together and moved into an apartment complex in southeast Shelby County. The wedding marked the beginning of a new phase in their lives. After the celebration, they had their first son, Telone, followed by baby Saya in 2014. Soon after, their 2 daughters Savi and Yazzie were born, bringing happiness to their family. In total, Martin and Shaninthia have 4 children together and 1 child from Shaninthia's previous relationship. As a young mother, her children have always been her #1 priority. She enjoys working part-time at Children's Hospital and is actively involved in a fundraising organization to help children. It is her passion and purpose in life. On a normal Friday, July 1, 2016. Around noon, Shaninthia called her husband, Martin. Her voice was completely calm. She told him that she was going to take the children to the movies. There was no indication that something terrible was going to happen that day. At that moment, they was having a quiet conversation when a sudden and confusing event occurred. Shaninthia suddenly changed her attitude and took a kitchen knife into the living room. She attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yazzie, leaving her defenseless and in a terrible situation. Yazzie's life was cut short abruptly by the person she loved and was closest to. Dee, the eldest child, was only 7 years old and witnessed this horrific scene. He was too young to understand what was happening, but he knew that he needed to act to save his younger brother and sister. Panicked and desperate, Dee ran out of the house. Shaninthia continued to hold the knife and chase her son. She rushed after Dee, but he screamed loudly, attracting the attention of the neighbors. Several neighbors heard his screams and rushed outside to see what was happening. They witnessed a horrifying scene that they could not forget in their minds. When they realized that Dee was being chased, but Shaninthia stopped. However, the horror was not over yet. Shaninthia returned to the house, where Savi and Telone were waiting for her. Distraught, she went upstairs to the bedroom where the children were lying. Those were the last moments of their innocent lives. Meanwhile, those who witnessed the horrifying scene quickly called the emergency services, asking for help and rescuing Dee and his siblings. None of them could have imagined the tragic consequences that awaited this peaceful street. The sheriff arrived at the scene and witnessed a strange scene inside the house at 7449 Southern Hill Road. They found Shanynthia covered in blood and her 4 children lying motionless, lifeless. The scene left everyone in shock. Shanynthia sat there, holding her cell phone and slowly dialing her husband, Martin. Her voice was soft but cold as she confessed to killing her children. The tragedy that had happened in their lives was a horrific event that would forever be remembered in this quiet neighborhood. By the time the prosecutor's office and the special forces arrived at the scene, everything was over. There was only an eerie silence in the house that had once been home to the happy Gardner family. Blood and horror were everywhere. Investigators found a bloody knife and witnessed the horrific incident. Chaplains came to help and were shocked by what had happened. Professionals were also ready to assist Dee, who was suffering from a horror that required immediate intervention. Shanynthia was arrested and held without bail. Her trial is scheduled for July 5th. The horrific events unfolding in Shanynthia Gardner's life have left society unable to remain indifferent. Although she has been portrayed as a monster, Shanynthia is still a mother and partner who radiates love, care, and joy. Her co-worker, Michelle Jaiman, has defended Shanynthia on social media and spoken out about the injustice of the charges. Michelle also emphasized the importance of considering postpartum depression in cases like this. Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, confirmed that infanticide by mothers is rare and often accompanied by mental illness. He also pointed to the lack of mental health funding in the state, which leaves many families without the support they need. Dr. Diane Barnes, an expert in postpartum psychology and health, explained the difference between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She emphasized that the two conditions are completely different, with different symptoms. In Shaninthea's case, Dr. Diane doubts that women with postpartum depression would commit such acts. Instead, she favors the possibility that Shanynthia suffered from psychosis. The investigation into Shanynthia Gardner's case has been fraught with difficulties. Her defense attorney, Craig Morton, has chosen not to comment on the case to the media in its early stages, saying it is too early to discuss it. On July 5, 2016, Shanynthia did not speak at her trial, appearing only via video. Judge Lambert questioned her, but Shanynthia did not respond. After the trial, she was taken to the Institute of Mental Health. Shaninthea's family members were present in court but declined to comment to reporters. Morton's attorney and prosecutor, Jennifer Nichols, plans to file a motion to preserve evidence in the case, including information gathered from social media. In January 2017, Shanynthia was formally charged with 4 counts: aggravated child abuse, aggravated murder with a weapon, aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The mysterious and chilling investigation continues, leaving the community waiting for justice and answers to many unanswered questions. The hearing was attended by Shanynthea's family members on the day of the tragedy. Sonia, Drill's mother, must have been devastated when she heard the news of the horrific tragedy. She rushed to the scene in a search for her nephew Dee. Sonia asserted that this action was completely unlike the Shanynthia she knew. Initially, she believed that something supernatural or demonic had caused the tragedy. However, as time passed and the initial shock subsided, Sonia began to consider possible reasons. She theorized that the couple may have been in the process of divorce. Shanynthia, fearful of raising 5 children on her own, may have made the terrifying decision to end it all. However, despite these speculations, Sonia found it hard to believe. To her, the Shanynthia she knew was not the person capable of such a terrible act. Dee's father did not believe Shanynthia was guilty. Although he was not the official guardian, he visited his son regularly after his separation from Shanynthia. However, the last time he saw his son was in November 2014. He noticed that Shanynthia was becoming more extreme in her actions and decisions. All attempts to contact her son failed and he was banned from interfering in her life. Shaninthia's friends and family soon noticed a sudden change in her. She began to show unusual symptoms, from feeling irritable to deep anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became erratic and unpredictable, leading many to suspect that she was suffering from postpartum depression. The sudden change in Shaninthia's behavior shocked those around her. She had been a strong, dependable woman who had everything under control. But now, she seemed to have lost her temper, leaving many wondering what had happened. The first signs of trouble appeared in March 2015. Friends and family were puzzled. One day, Shanninthia left work early, picked up her 5 children, and drove off in an unknown direction. Her husband, Martin, thought his wife was just taking the children for a walk and relaxing in the park, as was her usual routine. However, after several hours, Martin was confused and decided to call the police. Shanninthia drove from Memphis to Corinth, 74 miles east, with her 5 children. She did not know anyone there and had no apparent reason for being there. She was later found in the emergency room at St. Francis Hospital, but police did not disclose any details. She had superficial cuts on her neck and wrists, possibly from a suicide attempt, but her children were too young to understand what was happening. After being brought home, Shanninthia began to act strangely. She told her husband Martin that someone had threatened their family, but did not provide any further information. This shocked Martin, who had never had any previous threats. When she was with family and friends, Shanninthia complained about her job and felt bad about it. She then began to say that some of her co-workers wanted to hurt her. Despite the unusual signs, Shanninthia did not exhibit abusive or violent behavior toward her children or others. The wait for trial was long and difficult, with significant delays due to multiple psychiatric evaluations of the defendant. In 2021, the final non-jury trial took place. The defense focused on Shaninthia's mental illness argument. The prosecutor acknowledged her mental condition, but argued that the defendant still had the ability to distinguish right from wrong and was aware of the illegality of her actions. Ultimately, Shelby County Criminal Court Judge James rejected the defense. In December 2021, Shanninthia Gardner was found guilty on all charges against her. In February 2022, Shanninthia, 34, appeared in court to receive her sentence, with her husband Martin present. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison for each count of murder and 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Shanninthia will only be eligible for parole after serving 51 years, including the 5 years she has already served before sentencing. She will be eligible for parole at age 80, about 46 years from now. After the hearing, the prosecutor expressed approval of the sentence, saying it satisfied Martin's desire for justice for his children. Martin also felt relieved to know that Shanninthia would no longer have the opportunity to harm any more children. An evening vigil was held at Sonia family's apartment complex to remember the victims. Sonia stood among a crowd of neighbors, relatives, and police. Attendees held red and white candles, praying for the soul of the deceased. The Baptist minister said this was the first step in healing the community, and everyone could only support the surviving child and his father through this difficult time. Martin did not attend the memorial service because he was too sad. Sonia spoke to the press on his behalf. The leadership of the Children's Hospital where Shanninthia worked also sent condolences. Martin's colleagues set up a social media page to help him arrange the funeral for his 4 children. During the service, Martin spoke about his family and children in an emotional and noble way. His words showed admirable resilience. At the end of his speech, Martin emphasized that he would always remember the happy image of his family, with Shanninthia and the children by his side. This is a precious memory that he will cherish forever. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, the second child of Samantha Ingram, who aspired to be a model and dancer. Growing up, Kelsey had an older brother named Colin. After her birth, her family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, a small industrial town where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. However, her family life was turned upside down when her parents divorced after a few years. After the divorce, her father returned to Virginia. Kelsey grew up into a beautiful young woman with a perfect figure and attractive features that could easily lead to a modeling career. However, she found school unappealing and enjoyed socializing with friends, dating, and attending various social events. Her ultimate ambition was to become famous, appearing on magazine covers, giving interviews, and walking the red carpet at major events. Despite her ambition, Kelsey had no real talent and had to rely on her youth and looks to survive. While in high school, she began attending modeling auditions in hopes of starting a career. Her mother, Samantha, who dreamed of becoming a model, was happy to support her daughter in pursuing her dream. Unfortunately, Kelsey's modeling career was limited to a few small photo shoots for clothing catalogs. Kelsey married Jerry Turner at the age of 18, when she was already pregnant. Their daughter, Beverly, was born shortly after the wedding. However, the marriage did not last long and ended in divorce. By the age of 20, after giving up her modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey saw this as the beginning of a great career and a ticket to the life she had always dreamed of. Kelsey has received several modeling offers and opportunities over the years, including photo shoots for popular publications such as Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo shoot with 110 magazine. She frequently travels to major cities such as Los Angeles and Las Vegas to pursue these opportunities. In an interview, Kelsey describes herself as a curvaceous blonde with a slim waist and reflects her carefree personality, saying that she likes to have fun, party with her friends, and live life to the fullest. Kelsey is not overly concerned about the future. She frequently changes partners and quickly spends any money she earns or receives from fans. At 23, Kelsey became pregnant again and gave birth to a son, Josh. The father of the child did not want to marry her or acknowledge his child. As the modeling offers dried up, Kelsey turned to social media to build an audience. She actively manages her accounts, posting revealing photos in swimsuits, lingerie, or only partially covering her private parts. Kelsey has cultivated the perfect online image. Her carefully edited photos make her look beautiful, and her social media pages showcase her visits to high-end fashion stores, trendy nightclubs, and other locations. However, this ideal online image hid the true struggles of a single mother of two. Despite her wealthy appearance, her real life was difficult, as she was a poor money manager, often spending all her income at once. Around 2016, Kelsey faced serious problems after an unfortunate incident with her daughter. The girl suffered a severe trauma that left her daughter withdrawn and unable to speak. An acquaintance advised her to take her daughter to a psychiatrist. So she contacted renowned pediatric psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Burchard, who practiced in Monterey, California, to treat her daughter. Dr. Thomas Burchard is a highly respected pediatric psychiatrist who was born on February 16, 1948, in Boston, Massachusetts. He is the son of a prominent architect and engineer, and his family later moved to Virginia. Although his father taught architecture at prestigious institutions, including Harvard, Thomas chose a different path and pursued a medical career, focusing on child psychology. After completing medical school, Dr. Thomas served as a resident in pediatric psychiatry at several leading hospitals and taught at universities across the country. He eventually settled at a public clinical hospital on California's Monterey Peninsula, where he spent more than 40 years as a pediatric psychiatrist, building an impeccable reputation for his exceptional ability to connect with young patients and handle even the most complex and severe cases. He earned his doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley. Thomas was known for being kind, sharp, and incredibly generous. His compassionate nature motivated him to help those in need, especially young patients whose parents could not afford therapy. He also paid for hospital treatment for sick children from low-income families and supported single mothers. Dr. Thomas had a longtime companion named Di, who served as an assistant, housekeeper, and possibly more. As someone who knew him well, she was the first to notice changes in his behavior that showed early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. As Dr. Thomas entered his 70s, he became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and distracted. To hide these symptoms from his colleagues, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record important information, such as names, dates, and events. He always carried a notebook in his breast pocket that contained sensitive information such as bank information, account numbers, passwords, and card PINs. When Kelsey first visited Dr. Thomas with her daughter, she expressed her difficulties as a single mother and her inability to afford his services. However, the doctor offered to provide his services for free and went on to give Kelsey $300 to help support her children. Kelsey was shocked but quickly discovered that by sharing tearful stories of her difficult life, she could extort more money from the elderly doctor. Kelsey prepared a detailed plan for her next appointment with Dr. Thomas. During the visit, she told a heartbreaking story about her youngest son's illness and lack of money to buy expensive medicine for him. She gave a specific amount of money that she needed, and surprisingly, she received the entire amount from Dr. Thomas. Kelsey continued to make up false, tearful stories in the following visits. She would make up stories of hardship and receive larger and larger amounts of money from this trustworthy doctor. Of course, she did not use the money for her children but for her own entertainment, designer clothes. Not wanting to return to her hometown of Virginia, Kelsey asked Thomas to pay for her rent in California, saying that she could find work there more easily and that the climate there was better for her children. Thomas agreed and paid for the apartment she had chosen. Some people suspected that the doctor had an affair with Kelsey, a young blonde model, and that was why he always indulged her requests. However, Kelsey claimed that Thomas treated her and her children like family and acted out of kindness, not love. Thomas provided Kelsey and her children with a home, paid their bills, and gave them a large sum of money for their necessities. He also leased her a luxury Mercedes-Benz convertible. Over time, Kelsey realized that her modeling career was over and her youth was slipping away. Despite this, she made no effort to find another job and instead relied on Dr. Thomas for financial support. During this time, he spent about $500,000 on Kelsey and her children. However, she squandered that money on personal indulgences, such as breast augmentation and liposuction, in hopes of reviving her modeling career. Kelsey's excessive spending and partying lifestyle led to her neglecting her children. This eventually led to her ex-husband, who had won sole custody of their daughter through the courts, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. As a result, Kelsey was left with only her youngest son. Thomas was furious when he discovered the situation, but his anger was directed at Kelsey, not at her ex-husband. It was clear that Kelsey had neglected her children and was using the money meant for their care to support her lavish lifestyle. Dr. Thomas decided to address the issue with Kelsey, informing her that he would no longer support her lavish and idle lifestyle. However, Kelsey responded by threatening to spread false rumors that Dr. Thomas had inappropriate feelings for his young patients. Although he knew this was a lie, Dr. Thomas realized that any further rumors about the matter could seriously damage his reputation as a respected pediatric psychiatrist and scholar. Faced with this threat, Dr. Burchard reluctantly gave in to Kelsey's demands and continued to support her financially. In 2019, Kelsey moved to Las Vegas with her son to try to revive her modeling career, and she expected Thomas, whom she was blackmailing, to fund the effort. As instructed, Thomas rented a house for her and provided the requested funds. However, after receiving the financial support, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months and her whereabouts were unknown. Later that year, in February, Kelsey reappeared, contacting Thomas in an emotional state, saying that she was seriously ill, unable to work, and in dire financial straits. When Thomas refused to help, Kelsey's attitude changed completely and she continued to threaten and blackmail him. Judy, who was close to Thomas, advised him to report Kelsey's behavior to the police and contact Child Protective Services, due to concerns about Kelsey's ability to care for her younger son, especially since she had previously lost parental rights to her older daughter. Dr. Thomas took steps to prepare in case the conflict with Kelsey escalated in court. He informed his colleagues of the situation, and they agreed to support him. Judy had previously attempted to resolve the issue by speaking directly with Kelsey. Unfortunately, her efforts only resulted in Kelsey threatening retaliation. Thomas decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims. Judy tried to dissuade Thomas, but he was adamant about traveling to Las Vegas to meet with Kelsey. Judy also offered to accompany him as a friend for support, but Dr. Thomas insisted on handling the matter himself. He finally set off on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists got lost while traveling through Nevada. While trying to get to Lake Mead, they took a dirt road off the main highway. They came across a Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the desert. The roof was closed and the windows were rolled up, but unusually, there was no one around the car. Intrigued, the tourists cautiously approached the car and saw that one of the windows was broken. Upon further investigation, they looked inside and saw signs of a struggle. There were blood stains all over the interior. The tourists quickly contacted the police to report their shocking discovery. Police arrived at the scene around noon and discovered an unbearable stench. The source of the smell was quickly identified when police opened the trunk. Inside, they found the body of an elderly man hidden under a pile of furniture and rags. Beside him was a blood-stained baseball bat. The victim was later identified as Dr. Thomas, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy reported Dr. Thomas missing on March 2nd when she was unable to reach him at their scheduled meeting time. She immediately suspected something terrible had happened and contacted the police, hoping he would be found alive. The autopsy revealed numerous serious injuries to Thomas's body. These included scratches, bruises, and superficial cuts, as well as a severe head injury that may have been caused by a baseball bat found in the trunk of the car next to him. Part of his ear was severed, and his hands had multiple cuts that suggested a desperate attempt to defend himself. Thomas's face also had noticeable bruises with a unique printed pattern. Most shocking was the evidence that the man had been placed in the trunk of the car while still alive and injured, eventually suffocating from the intense desert heat. The investigation focused on Kelsey Turner as the prime suspect, as the car at the crime scene had been rented under her name. Judy had provided the police with Kelsey's address, which matched the location Dr. Thomas had visited. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they found the house empty. Although no one was there, the house showed signs of a hasty cleanup. Containers of cleaning products were scattered throughout the house and the air smelled strongly of household chemicals, suggesting that someone had tried to erase any evidence of the crime. The house was occupied by Kelsey, her 4-year-old son, and her new boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, along with 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. All had fled, making them suspects, as Kelsey could not have inflicted such injuries on the doctor or placed his body in the trunk of her car herself. Jeremy Eric was the only person the police interviewed. He explained that he and his girlfriend had left Kelsey's house while the doctor was still alive. According to Jeremy, His girlfriend had been drinking heavily and began flirting with Thomas, trying to extort money from him, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This made Kelsey extremely angry, as she accused Jeremy's girlfriend of trying to steal Thomas from her. The situation became worse, and Jeremy had to quickly move his girlfriend out of the house to avoid a fight. He did not return for several days and was unaware of what had happened after he left. During the investigation, the police learned from Judy that Dr. Thomas kept a notebook with his bank account information and passwords, which he frequently lost. When they searched, they discovered that the notebook was missing. Furthermore, 2 of Dr. Thomas's accounts showed significant withdrawals on March 3rd, after which Thomas's accounts and cards were immediately closed. On March 21st, in Stockton, California, police arrested Kelsey and her boyfriend for attempting to withdraw money again. It was later discovered that the couple had stayed in various motels with a child, paid in cash, and moved frequently. They initially attempted to drain all of Thomas's accounts but were unsuccessful. They then attempted to withdraw more money with the intention of fleeing to Mexico but were prevented by the accounts being closed. Diana, a neighbor who was at Kelsey's home that night, cooperated with police and shared her account of what happened on the night of March 7th. According to her, the trouble began after Jeremy and his girlfriend left. Kelsey had a heated argument with Dr. Thomas, who refused to give her money. Kelsey threatened to ruin the doctor's reputation by spreading rumors about his misconduct with young patients. As the argument escalated, Kelsey became aggressive. Dr. Thomas, feeling threatened, locked himself in his room. However, John broke the door open with a strong shoulder thrust and then hit Thomas hard with a baseball bat. This caused a serious injury, resulting in a large hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana rushed in, pleading with everyone to calm down. Seeing Thomas's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, fearing the consequences of their actions. After hearing Thomas say that he would tell the police that he had been attacked and robbed by strangers, the 4 drove to the garage. Diana was ordered by Kelsey to return to the house and clean up, removing all traces of blood. Diana followed the instructions and began cleaning, but soon heard screams and a struggle coming from the garage. She rushed back to find the couple brutally attacking Dr. Thomas in the car. The doctor was trapped and unable to escape or defend himself. It became clear that Kelsey and John had no intention of taking Thomas to the hospital. Instead, they planned to kill him with a baseball bat, a small knife, and John's empty pistol, leaving bruises on the doctor's face. Diana was instructed to return to the house and continue cleaning. Fearing for her safety, she complied and left the garage. While Diana was still cleaning, she heard the couple's car drive away. Several hours later, John's car returned with Kelsey, but the other car, a convertible, was nowhere to be seen. Diana remained unaware of the convertible's location until she heard about a car found in the desert with a body in the trunk. Diana chose to cooperate with the police from the start by agreeing to a plea deal and sharing all relevant information she knew. This decision resulted in a reduced sentence for tampering with evidence, serving just 3 years in prison. John Logan Kennison was convicted of murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Kelsey Turner's trial was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, causing significant delays in the trial. While in custody, she gave birth to a baby girl who, along with her son, was placed under the protection of social services, as none of Kelsey's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. Kelsey Turner was sentenced to 25 years in prison in January 2023, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 10 years. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Correctional Center for Women in Las Vegas. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Elizabeth Nicole Forshee-Cyperda. Elizabeth was born on May 13, 1978, in Truckee, California. She lived with her parents and younger brother. When Elizabeth was 13, the Cyperta family moved across the street. Michael and Sally Cyperta had 2 young children and were struggling to balance work and family. Michael wanted Sally to go back to work, so they decided to find a babysitter. Michael suggested hiring Elizabeth, then 14, to babysit their children. Sally agreed, and Elizabeth began babysitting for the neighbor's family. Elizabeth grew attached to Michael and Sally's children as she spent more time with them. The children also enjoyed being around her. When Elizabeth was 15, her father passed away, a traumatic event that deeply affected her. According to her mother, Donna Forshee, Elizabeth became more sensitive and vulnerable after this event. She began to admire and grow closer to Michael Cyperta, seeing him as an ideal father figure. Elizabeth believes that Michael loves his children unconditionally and supports their interests. Elizabeth used to babysit Michael and Sally's children during the day. However, she started staying at their house until late at night. This continued for about 2 years. One day, Michael decided to move to Iowa with his family to be closer to his relatives. He invited Elizabeth to come along as a babysitter. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, strongly objected and tried to stop her daughter, even calling Child Protective Services to intervene. However, Donna's efforts were in vain. Elizabeth was too attached to Michael, Sally, and their 2 children. Although she was still in high school, she was determined to stick with her decision and moved to Winfield, Iowa with Cyperta's family. After Elizabeth moved away, her mother Donna and her best friend Shannon Gerber maintained regular contact with her, either by phone or by weekly letters. Elizabeth graduated from high school in Iowa in May 1997. Donna attended her graduation and gave her daughter an emerald and diamond ring, which Elizabeth treasured. During this time, Michael divorced his wife, Sally, and began a relationship with Elizabeth. After the divorce, Sally left the children with Michael and Elizabeth and moved away. Although Sally maintained contact with her children, she cut off all contact with Michael and stopped speaking to Elizabeth. Michael, then in her 40s, immediately demonstrated his controlling nature. He limited what Elizabeth could and could not do, as well as who she could talk to. He attempted to control every aspect of Elizabeth's life. From the beginning, their relationship seemed dysfunctional. As a result, Elizabeth's mother and best friend Shannon found it increasingly difficult to contact her. Michael did not like Elizabeth talking to them and would often get angry if she did. As a result, Elizabeth would only dare to call them when Michael was not home. During this time, Elizabeth became friends with Harper Tracy through church. Harper noticed that Elizabeth had suffered 5 or 6 injuries during their friendship, including finger marks on her neck and bruises on her stomach. Harper's daughter, Sidnee, who was about 7 years old, knew Michael's children through church and occasionally played at their home. Sidnee remembers one time when she visited, she witnessed Michael pushing Elizabeth down the stairs and kneeling on her. Harper also remembers Elizabeth arriving at church in a state of panic and fear after fleeing a violent argument with Michael. Elizabeth confided that she was afraid of Michael and could not take any more abuse. Harper discovered multiple bruises on Elizabeth's stomach and marks on her arms. Elizabeth stayed in Harper's trailer for a month. During that time, Michael appeared near the trailer almost every day and acted threateningly. He would park his truck about 10 feet away from the trailer and tease Elizabeth. Specifically, he threatened her by saying that Elizabeth would be isolated and no one would find her if she did not listen to him. He left hazmat notices and a torn cat collar outside, along with a message warning that she would disappear like the cat if she did not return. He also threatened to harm the family's animals and began blackmailing her with videotapes and photos he had. According to Harper, he threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body 6 times. Harper called the police to stop him, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. There were clearly many warning signs about Michael. Everyone saw him as someone to stay away from. However, Elizabeth was young and naive, so she still hoped that Michael would change. Unfortunately, at the age of 40, people rarely change their behavior and attitude towards others. After a long time of pressure from Michael, eventually, Elizabeth decided to leave Harper's Trail to live with Michael. They married in January 1998 in Mount Pleasant. Despite her attempts to prevent the marriage, Harper attended their wedding. Afterwards, Michael took the initiative to cut off all contact between Harper and Elizabeth. At Michael's request, Elizabeth finally told Harper not to come to their house anymore. Harper was not the only one concerned about Elizabeth and Michael's marriage. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, also disapproved of the relationship and refused to come to Iowa for her daughter's wedding. However, in June 2000, Elizabeth went to California to attend her younger brother's high school graduation. Although Michael stayed in Iowa, he continued to keep an eye on Elizabeth. During the 3 days Elizabeth stayed with her mother, Michael called her repeatedly. He was concerned that Donna was trying to influence Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. After each call, Elizabeth felt sad and confused. She considered leaving her husband but was not sure. To reassure Michael, Elizabeth moved out of her mother's house and moved in with Shannon Gerber, her childhood friend. Shannon had kept in touch with Elizabeth since Elizabeth moved to Iowa. They tried to talk every month, often calling when Michael was not home. However, Elizabeth's move to live with her friend did not lessen Michael's anger. Instead, he began harassing Shannon by calling her repeatedly. Most of the calls were threatening. Shannon recalled Michael threatening Elizabeth. He screamed at her and said he would kill her if she did not come home. Michael also threatened to kill Elizabeth's mother, younger brother, Shannon, and her young son. He called her constantly, day and night, sometimes dozens of times an hour. Finally, Shannon's husband couldn't take it anymore and turned off the phone. This clearly made Michael even angrier. Shannon begged Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. "I didn't want her to go because I was afraid I would never see her again," Shannon confided. She deliberately took a detour to the airport, hoping Elizabeth would miss her flight. However, the flight was delayed and Elizabeth was still able to catch it. After returning to Mount Pleasant, Iowa, Elizabeth began working at Experian. There, she met Sarah Thomas, a coworker who quickly became her best friend. Because Sarah lived near the Sipura family home, she often took Elizabeth home after work. During these trips, they talked a lot and Elizabeth gradually trusted Sarah. She shared with Sarah about her difficult relationship with her husband, Michael, and even showed Sarah the bruises on her body that Michael had caused. Elizabeth and Sarah became very close to each other, close enough to cause problems. One day, while Michael was away, his 2 children peered through the bedroom keyhole and saw Sarah and Elizabeth getting intimate. When Elizabeth discovered that the children had witnessed the scene, she hastily packed up and moved in with Sarah. When Sarah's girlfriend, Terry, went outside to walk the dog, Michael came over and asked her to call Sarah's work phone and ask Elizabeth to return home. He had a bottle of alcohol in his hand, and his children were following him and crying. Michael explained that his wife had left him, she was not answering his calls, and he did not know what to do. When Elizabeth and Sarah entered the apartment, they saw Michael and Terry waiting for them. Frightened, Elizabeth and Sarah left. Michael shouted at Terry to follow him. They got into the car and gave chase. The 2 couples met face to face in a nearby parking lot. Terry started fighting with Sarah because she felt betrayed. Elizabeth was sitting in the car at the time and was afraid to get out. Cursing, screaming, and threatening, Michael approached Elizabeth and dragged her out through the window of the car. During the struggle, Elizabeth suffered a lacerated rib, and her shirt got torn. Sarah and Elizabeth fled to a nearby gas station, where they reported the assault to the police. The state charged Michael with first-degree burglary and domestic abuse assault. The court approved the no-contact order protecting Elizabeth. Terry packed her things and left, so Elizabeth and Sarah started living together. Michael continued to harass Sarah despite a ban. He would sit across the street, shouting insults or verbally abusing her. Additionally, Sarah received numerous incoming phone calls, but whenever she picked up, the caller would remain silent. She filed a report with the police, who worked with her phone company to set up a trap on her line to track the origin of these calls. Over a 3-week period, from June 26th to July 16th, Sarah's phone records revealed Michael made 162 calls to her apartment. On July 16, 2000, 1 month after her breakup with Michael, Sarah left for work at 10:30 p.m. At the time, Elizabeth was asleep on the couch. Their dog was safely locked in the bathroom to avoid disturbing Elizabeth when Sarah returned home at 4 a.m. However, upon arriving back, Sarah was surprised to find that Elizabeth had vanished. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle, and Elizabeth's personal documents remained intact. The dog was still locked in the bathroom. Sarah decided to go to bed. When she awoke the next morning, Elizabeth was still missing. It became clear that Elizabeth had left without taking her purse, clothes, or other essential belongings, and she did not leave behind any note or explanation. Sarah reported Elizabeth's disappearance to the police 24 hours after first discovering she was gone. Elizabeth was 22 years old when she disappeared. The police launched an investigation, and of course, Michael was their first suspect. On July 16th, the day Elizabeth disappeared, Michael started phoning the apartment around 3 p.m., logging more than a dozen calls through the evening. He last called at 10:56 p.m., that is, he stopped making calls 26 minutes after Sarah left for work and left Elizabeth alone. On July 17th, Michael was supposed to be at work. His friend Jared agreed to watch Michael's children. Jared testified he found Michael was pretty intoxicated when he arrived at his house around 5:30 a.m. Jared said Michael told him Elizabeth had stayed overnight and left around 5 a.m. Michael decided not to go to work that morning. Police called Michael the next day, July 18th, to ask if he had heard from Elizabeth. He said he had not. On July 20th, officers came to his house to let him know Elizabeth was missing. Michael said his taking a sick day from work on July 17th, the day after Elizabeth disappeared, was a coincidence. Michael also stated that due to their breakup, he hadn't been eating and had been getting cramps. Elizabeth seemed to disappear into thin air. She didn't contact her family or friends, her bank account was untouched, and she had not even received her salary for the last month. The investigators knew that Elizabeth could not just leave without documents and money. All the friends she could have stayed with knew nothing about her whereabouts. The police interviewed residents and distributed flyers with an image and description of Elizabeth, but none of these actions gave the desired result. In early September 2000, Larry Headland, an agent with the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation, interviewed Michael. During the interview, Michael claimed that he and Elizabeth had a harmonious relationship and denied any allegations of abuse between them. When asked about the attack on Elizabeth on June 16th, Michael admitted that it was an unusual action on his part. He explained that he had been drinking and that his emotions had taken over, leading to his inappropriate actions. Initially, Michael denied making the harassing phone calls to Sarah's apartment. However, when presented with evidence from the call records, he admitted responsibility. The agent then pointed out that the calls to Michael's apartment had stopped the night Elizabeth went missing. This caused Michael to become stressed. Michael explained that he just wanted to avoid arrest and did not want to be charged or held responsible for anything. That's why he lied about the phone calls. He objected when Larry suggested that Elizabeth was dead. After this interview, the police obtained a search warrant for Michael's home. In Michael's bedroom, the police found an unlocked safe. Inside or on top of the safe, an officer found a $2,000 gold pendant that Michael had given Elizabeth and a V-shaped diamond and emerald ring that she had received from her mother as a graduation gift. Elizabeth only removed the ring when she was showering or soaking in the tub, otherwise, it was on her finger. In police photos taken after Michael attacked Elizabeth, the ring was still on her hand. Elizabeth had not been back to Michael's house since. So how did the ring end up in Michael's safe? When the police asked for an explanation, Michael said that Elizabeth must have left it behind when she moved out. However, officer pointed out that Elizabeth was still wearing the ring in a photo taken on June 16, the day of the attack. Michael could not explain why the ring was in his bedroom. There are some suspicious points in Elizabeth's disappearance. Michael abruptly stopped contacting her on the day she disappeared, although the police only notified him 4 days later. This suggests that Michael may be hiding something. However, the police need concrete evidence to charge him. Time has passed so quickly that it is difficult to find clues. One possibility is that Elizabeth voluntarily went into hiding. But her family does not believe this. Although the case has been quiet for many years, her mother, Donna, has not lost hope that her daughter will return. Every year, she travels to Iowa, where Elizabeth used to live, to organize activities to raise awareness about her daughter's disappearance. In 2010, Donna rented a billboard with Elizabeth's picture and offered a $20,000 reward for any information about her daughter. Donna said she was concerned that something might have happened to her daughter, but she was hopeful that she would eventually be found. "Someone definitely knows what happened to my daughter, and I hope that us coming out will jog their memory," she said. 10 years after her daughter's disappearance, Donna has developed her own theories about what happened. In an interview, she said, "I think the person called her and lured her out of the apartment to meet them. Then they argued and something bad happened that night." Despite the best efforts of the police and her family, Elizabeth's fate remains a mystery. Since her disappearance in 2000, investigators have searched 79 different locations but have not found Elizabeth's body. They entered her information into the National Crime Information Center's Missing Persons database. 17 years later, in 2017, the investigation was reopened. By this time, Michael Siperda had moved to Colorado. Police reviewed all the evidence and interviews. They discovered a key detail that had previously been overlooked. Jared, Michael's friend who was assigned to watch Michael's children on July 17, 2000, told police that when he arrived at Michael's house at 5:30 a.m., he found Michael quite drunk. According to Jared's testimony, Michael said that Elizabeth had stayed the night and left around 5 a.m. However, in previous interviews, Michael had never mentioned Elizabeth sleeping over at his house. More significantly, Elizabeth's jewelry was found in Michael's safe. Authorities decided to arrest Michael 17 years after Elizabeth went missing. Although her body was never found, investigators believe that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was the culprit. In November 2017, Michael was arrested in Colorado and extradited to Iowa, where he was charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife Elizabeth. Donna said, "This is the best news we've had in 17 years. We've waited a long time and are so glad that he's finally been arrested." Michael later waived his right to a jury trial. The loss of key physical evidence, especially the victim's body, made it significantly more difficult for prosecutors to prove guilt. Without a body, forensic experts could not determine the cause of death, and the jury could not directly observe the victim's injuries or view crime scene photos. The defense argued that the prosecutor's goal was not to find the truth, but to convict Michael by looking for inconsistencies in witness testimony. Although the trial took place 18 years after the incident, the defense acknowledged during closing arguments that a body was not required to establish a homicide. However, Michael still challenged the state's evidence of Elizabeth's death. the district court concluded that the state had proven her death beyond a reasonable doubt. The court held that any theory that Elizabeth was still alive and could reappear at any time was unrealistic. The state presented evidence that Michael was the last person to speak to Elizabeth at 10:56 p.m. on July 16, which he himself admitted. The district court noted Jared's testimony that Michael told Elizabeth to stay at his house that night. In addition, there were other suspicious circumstances. Michael unexpectedly left work on July 17 and did not call Elizabeth's apartment again, even though the police did not officially report her missing until July 20. From this evidence, the state established that Michael's hatred of Elizabeth led to murder. Because Michael was controlling and possessive of Elizabeth, it was highly likely that he intentionally caused her physical harm when she decided to leave him for someone else. The strained relationship between them was clear evidence of Michael's intentional intent to cause harm. The state presented evidence that Michael had repeatedly threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body so that no one would find it. From these repeated threats, the jury could conclude that Michael had intended to kill Elizabeth. The court reviewed the evidence and made a crucial decision. They discovered that Elizabeth had opened a new bank account just 9 days before her disappearance, but had not withdrawn her last paycheck. They concluded that she was dead. After carefully evaluating all the evidence, the court found that Michael was responsible for Elizabeth's death. On June 25, 2018, Michael Cyperda, 58, was convicted of first-degree murder. On August 23, 2018, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole and ordered him to pay $150,000 in restitution for Elizabeth's death. However, the story does not end there. In September 2020, the Iowa Court of Appeals changed Michael Cyperda's conviction from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. Judge Mary Tabor, in a 30-page ruling, noted that while there was enough evidence to conclude that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was responsible, the prosecutor failed to prove that Michael intended to kill Elizabeth. This led to the reduced charge. The case was particularly difficult because there was no body, weapon, or crime scene. Michael asked to be released or at least given a new trial. Ultimately, the court sentenced Michael Cyperda to 50 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Susan Reinert. Susan Reinert, affectionately known as Sue, was born in 1943 in the town of Ridgeway in northwestern Pennsylvania. Her father, William Gallagher, worked as a newspaper sales manager, while her mother, Jane Gallagher, was a dedicated teacher. From an early age, Susan showed a passion for learning and a strong love of literature, suggesting that she might follow in her mother's footsteps into the field of education. While studying at Grove City College, Susan met a young Air Force recruit named Kenneth Reinert. Although their meeting was simple, it had a profound impact on her life. Susan and Kenneth's relationship deepened as they both pursued higher education. After much effort and determination, Susan graduated from college with a bachelor's degree. She continued her education, earning a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University. In 1965, Susan and Kenneth began their new lives after graduating from Grove City College. Because Kenneth was in the military, they had to move around a lot. They started by moving to Sacramento, California, then returned to the Northeast and lived in Rome, New York. The family even lived in Puerto Rico for a while before settling permanently in the Philadelphia area in 1971. In 1974, Susan Reinhardt, a devoted teacher and loving mother, experienced a turning point when she and Kenneth decided to divorce. The divorce was amicable, without legal disputes. Susan then became an active single mother, focusing on building a home for her 2 children, Karen and Michael. With her warm and friendly personality, she was well liked by her colleagues and students at Chestnut Wald Elementary School. In addition to her teaching career, Susan was actively involved with Parents Without Partners, especially in the Valley Forge program. After her mother passed away, Susan found strength and support from this organization despite her grief. Despite many challenges, she persevered through her involvement with Parents Without Partners. Susan's story took a mysterious turn. On June 22, 1979, Susan Reinhardt and her 2 children spent their day together. That morning, her son, Michael, had been with his father, Kenneth. That evening, they had attended a father-son baseball game. However, the game ended early when Susan picked Michael up at 8:30 p.m. That evening, Susan contacted her ex-husband's parents, Florence and John Reinhardt. Despite their divorce, she had maintained a good relationship with them. Susan checked the gas tank and found it was nearly full, enough for the trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town about an hour's drive north. The purpose of the trip was to attend a single-parent conference and spend the weekend with her children. Susan had signed up to run a workshop there and keep the children involved in activities throughout the weekend. They planned to leave on Saturday morning and return home late Sunday. At around 9 p.m. on Friday night, Karen and Michael were playing outside, picking up hailstones left over from a summer storm. About 30 minutes later, neighbors heard Susan's orange-red Plymouth Horizon start. Minutes later, the car disappeared. Susan had left the house with her 2 children, possibly to visit her boyfriend before going to the conference. She was in a long-term relationship with William Bradfield, a fellow teacher. Although they tried to keep it a secret, the relationship was causing tension in Susan's marriage to Kenneth. There were even rumors that Susan and William might get married. On June 22, 1979, Susan and her children set off after visiting her boyfriend. They planned to travel to Allentown, about 49 miles north, to spend the night at a motel. However, they never arrived. Susan and her children disappeared without a trace, leaving those who knew and loved them distraught. On June 25, 1979, Susan's Plymouth hatchback was discovered in the parking lot of the Host Inn in Harrisburg, 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, Susan's lifeless body was found in the back of the car. The details of her agonizing death were gruesome. Her body was naked, beaten, and bound with chains, curled up in the wheel well of the car. Her hands were tied, and she had black eyes. She had been beaten with chains or tied so tightly that the chains left bruises on her back. More frighteningly, she had been injected with a fatal dose of morphine. The whereabouts of her 2 children, however, were unknown. They had seemingly disappeared without a trace. Police searched for hours. But no one had seen them, nor had any of Susan's friends or relatives seen them that weekend. So, the police began investigating further. They posted pictures of the Reinhardt family in newspapers for weeks, looking for any clues about the children. The investigation discovered that Susan had named William Bradfield, the man she thought she was going to marry, as the beneficiary of $730,000 in life insurance policies. This raised suspicions that her children might have been murdered so he could receive the money. However, William Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was in Cape May, New Jersey, the weekend Susan was murdered and her children went missing. Several teachers were present and confirmed his whereabouts. The police then turned their attention to Upper Marion High School, where Susan worked, as the school was experiencing problems. Principal Jay Smith was embroiled in a scandal. He had served as principal until he was fired the previous year after being arrested at a local shopping center. In his Ford Granada, police discovered loaded handguns, a balaclava, and burglary tools. More disturbingly, a syringe containing morphine was found in the trunk. Jay had been struggling before that. His wife, Stephanie Smith, was diagnosed with malignant cancer and died in August 1979, after several hospitalizations. During this time, Stephanie Smith began keeping a diary, documenting her husband's strange behavior, which became increasingly worse. Jay became involved in intimate groups and changed sexual partners. which Stephanie Smith did not approve of, and this seemed to lead to even more disturbing behavior. In September 1977, Stephanie Huntsberger, the adult daughter of the couple, moved in with her parents along with her husband, Edward Huntsberger. They settled into the Smiths' home in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, that fall. Stephanie Smith was battling cancer, which caused turmoil in the family and seemed to increase tensions among them. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law, were struggling with heroin addiction and had difficulty finding and keeping jobs before deciding to move back in with their families. Moving in with their parents was a desperate attempt to escape drugs. In early 1978, Jay Smith's daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Huntsberger and Edward, mysteriously disappeared. They had moved in with Jay Smith and his wife just a few months earlier. They was last seen in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. When they left, they promised to return soon, but then they disappeared. Their disappearance was first noticed when Edward failed to show up for a meeting with his probation officer later that month. Authorities contacted Jay Smith, the last person known to have had contact with the couple. Jay Smith told people that Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger had run away to California. He said they owed money to some drug dealers in the area and had fled to the West Coast. However, he was unable to provide any further information about the incident. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger lived a nomadic life, so their disappearance went unnoticed for some time. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for burglary. When police searched Jay's home, they found several suspicious items, including weapons, drugs, security uniforms, badges, and pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and office supplies stolen from a nearby school. Jay was suspected of being involved in recent armed robberies. During the burglary trial, Jay's friend William testified that they were on vacation when the robberies occurred. However, the jury did not believe this testimony. Jay had a bad reputation in Upper Merion and was known as the Prince of Darkness. Jay Smith was eventually sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison on June 25, 1979, for a series of store robberies that took place in the late 1970s. During the investigation, Jay was arrested for burglary. Although Jay was in custody, the police still considered him a prime suspect in Susan's murder and continued to investigate his past. They made a remarkable discovery: Jay's daughter and son-in-law had also disappeared under similar circumstances as Susan and her 2 children. This led the police to suspect that there might be a connection between the 2 disappearances, Susan's death and the disappearance of her children. First, Susan had been killed by a morphine overdose, and a large amount of morphine had been discovered in Jay's home several months earlier. Second, a plastic comb with Jay's identification had been found in Susan's car. The disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law closely resembled the disappearance of Susan's children. The events that unfolded in this case were shocking and left a lasting impact on the public. However, the most shocking truth was yet to be revealed. In late July 1979, about a month after Susan's body was found near Harrisburg, investigators discovered a potential motive for the horrific murder that was financial gain. On July 20, 1979, a Philadelphia attorney filed a motion to stay the execution of Susan's will in both Montgomery County and Delaware. The motion was filed on behalf of Kenneth Reinert, Susan's ex-husband, and Patrick Gallagher, her brother. The purpose of this legal action was to give both men an opportunity to review the contents of Susan's will before it was executed. They decided to file in both counties because Susan's residence in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, was near the county line, allowing her to file her will in both places. It was later discovered that just a few weeks before her death, Susan had made several significant changes to her will. She had also purchased several large life insurance policies, naming her current boyfriend, William, as the beneficiary. In the legal documents, she referred to him as her future husband. As the police investigated further, they determined that Susan's death occurred between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24, 1979. William and other teachers arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday and remained there until the afternoon of Monday, June 25. However, it was unclear exactly where William was during the time of Susan's disappearance, casting doubt on his alibi. The investigation also revealed that Susan had withdrawn large sums of money from her account, totaling approximately $25,000, through multiple transactions due to daily limits. She told the bank staff that she intended to invest the money in high-yield investments managed by William, whom she referred to as her future husband. What Susan did not expect was that she was just one of many women in William's life. He was secretly dating several other people, including a coworker who taught English, with whom he had maintained a secret relationship for nearly 10 years. William had promised Susan that the investments would yield large returns to finance their upcoming wedding and move to England. During the investigation, investigators found fake stocks and bonds in Susan's home, which initially puzzled them. They later discovered that William had sold these fake securities to Susan and then passed them on to her. These securities were mostly related to fictitious and worthless companies, suggesting that William had been deceiving Susan for a long time. This discovery added a new dimension to the case, further clarifying William's financial motives. In March 1980, William was called to testify in a civil lawsuit. During his first appearance, he refused to answer questions directly and referred questions to his legal counsel. Although William's attorneys denied that he had taken Susan's money, they were willing to negotiate with the state to settle the matter and handle Susan's $1 million will. By June 1980, William had officially testified in court for the first time. He denied most of the allegations related to the case, insisting that his relationship with Susan was not as serious as she had told her relatives. He also denied any plans to marry Susan later that year, contrary to what Susan had shared with her close friends. William made unsubstantiated allegations about Susan's relationship with Jay Smith, the former principal of Upper Marion High School, although there was no evidence to support these claims. On the contrary, many of Susan's relatives and friends confirmed her long-term relationship with William. It should be noted that Jay Smith was in prison during the trial. William did not explain why Susan chose him as the heir to her $1 million-plus estate. Instead, he described Susan as unreliable and troubled. William also blamed Susan for her problems and claimed that he was only helping to solve her problems, especially in the civil lawsuit over the missing $25,000. In June 1980, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a separate lawsuit. They wanted to recover the entire $450,000 insurance policy that Susan had received a few weeks before her death. The intention was to put the money in a trust fund to conduct their own investigation. The case was complicated and full of unexpected events. On February 20, 1981, William was arrested by the police on 3 charges, 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy. He was accused of keeping $25,000 that Susan had given him to invest. William was released on bail on February 23, 1981, but his criminal trial was scheduled to begin the following month. Before the criminal trial began, the civil case was closed. It was decided that $36,000 from Susan's estate would be used to further investigate the children's clothing and settle a dispute over the remainder of her will. This prevented William from receiving any money on August 3, 1981. William's criminal trial lasted 5 days and ended with a guilty verdict on the theft charge. Delaware County District Attorney Edward Weiss then asked that William's bail be increased from $25,000 to $75,000. The reason was that they believed this sentence increased the risk of William fleeing, especially since there was a possibility that he would be charged with murder. Judge Robert A. Wright granted this request. On April 6, 1983, William was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police on several felony charges, including 3 counts of murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to kidnap, and obstruction of justice. The jury concluded that William knew about the plan to kill Susan and her children and was involved in the crimes. Although J. Smith was believed to be involved, he was not charged at the time. Part of the indictment was based on the testimony of Proctor Noel, a fellow inmate, who stated that during a game of chess, William confessed to his involvement in the murders. The arrest of William Bradfield in April 1983 was a major step in the investigation of the case. Although there was no physical evidence linking William to Susan Reinert's death or the disappearance of her children, prosecutors were confident in the case. William's previous burglary convictions and his connection to the suspected body dumping led to more serious charges in the 1980s. J. Smith, who was serving time for other crimes, was forced to testify before a grand jury despite invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. William Bradfield was also called to testify in 1984, but details of his testimony have not been released. The hearing was reportedly related to the disappearances of Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law. In April 1985, Jay was asked to provide handwriting samples to compare with old documents that might be related to the plan to kill Susan Reinert. This investigation led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan Reinert's body was found. Jay was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and held in custody while awaiting trial. In 1984, Joseph Wambaugh, a well-known crime author, published a book about the case. The book supported the theory that Jay was the killer. A television movie based on the book was later produced, bringing the case to national attention. Jay maintained his innocence throughout his imprisonment. He appealed and accused William Bradfield of framing him. In 1989, the court reviewed the case and found problems with the indictment, leading to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a more thorough investigation. In 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, overturning the murder conviction and finding the prosecution guilty. For the next 2 decades, the state did not retry the case, allowing Jay to live out his life in freedom. William Bradfield continued to evade liability and refused to pay the $25,000 owed to Susan Reinert's estate. The case dragged on until 1996. Jay sued the state and Joseph Wambaugh for defamation and conspiracy, but both lawsuits were dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, after more than 10 years in prison, was found unconscious in his cell and died of cardiac arrest. Susan's ex-husband, Kenneth Reinert, died in June 2002 without knowing the fate of his 2 missing children. J. Smith, who was exonerated in 1992, wrote a book about his case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009. However, the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, remains unsolved to this day. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Kenneth Keith. Michael Hawkinsmith, 35, was born in Danville, Kentucky. He was a well-known pastor at a local church in his community. After many years of service there, he chose to take a job at a local pawn shop named ABC, while still working part-time as a pastor. Due to health issues faced by the previous owner, Michael eventually took over the pawn shop. Michael was an honest and helpful person, which allowed him to easily build relationships with customers. In his personal life, he was married to Angela, and they had 2 children, Andrew and Naomi. Michael and Angela owned a pawn shop called ABC Gold, Games and More, located in Danville, Kentucky. They homeschooled their 9-year-old son, Andrew, and cared for their newborn daughter, Naomi. Andrew frequently visited the pawn shop and saw it as his play area. On the morning of September 20th, 2013, the Hawkinsmiths visited the ABC store as intended. During that morning, Dan Smith, a frequent visitor to the pawn shop, arrived as scheduled. Smith, often referred to as the Gold Man, specialized in trading gold between pawn shops throughout the state. Approximately 15 minutes after the store opened, while Michael and Smith were conducting their business, a bearded man entered the store and instructed everyone to get on the ground, leading to a series of alarming events. Andrew was at the ABC store when his mother, Angela, told him to hide. Sensing the tense situation, he quickly called the police to report what was happening. 6 minutes after the alarm was raised, the police arrived at the murder scene. When they entered the building, they discovered a significant trail of blood that led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. They then found his wife, Angela, 38, and another victim, Dan Smith, 60, a broker, on the opposite side of the counter. All three victims had sustained severe injuries from gunshot wounds to their heads and bodies. Police later discovered 9-year-old Andrew and 14-month-old Naomi hiding in a closet. They had endured unimaginable trauma and were left without their parents, becoming orphans. While investigating the crime scene, police discovered 14 spent shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase belonging to Dan Smith. Notably, the victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the register were left untouched, indicating that robbery was not the motive. The investigation was further complicated by the absence of surveillance cameras at the pawn shop, requiring police to look for potential witnesses. An employee from Rainbowy Cleaners, a nearby dry cleaning business, offered crucial information by describing a vehicle that had been parked near the shop that morning. The vehicle involved was a silver pickup truck, driven by a large man with a bushy beard. While one team of investigators searched the area, another team had the difficult task of informing the victim's closest relatives about the tragedy. Michael's parents were heartbroken by the news but felt grateful that their grandchildren, Andrew and Naomi, had survived. The tragic news also reached the daughter of the third victim, Dan Smith. Dan was involved in buying precious metals and was knowledgeable about his field, which helped him connect with various people. His business often required him to handle large sums of cash, sometimes reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars. Police began to suspect that Dan Smith might have been the main target of the criminal. Through surveillance, they learned that before visiting the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop, Dan Smith had stopped at the Lawson Jewelry Store in Harrodsburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. Inside the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera installed on the far wall, which recorded every customer who entered and exited. They wanted to see if anyone was following Dan Smith. At 8:16 a.m., Dan Smith entered the store, and there were no other customers present at that time. Dan Smith was seen carrying a briefcase that looked exactly like the one later discovered at the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. He smiled at the woman working behind the counter and then walked toward the back of the store. A short time later, he came back into view on the footage, talked briefly with an elderly woman who had just walked in, and then left the store quickly. The footage from the exterior camera did not reveal any suspicious activity. The police could only keep an eye on the man, not realizing that he would soon be involved in a tragic incident. Andrew Hawkinsmith was taken to the police station to give his testimony. He explained that he was at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith entered carrying a bag of money. While Michael and Dan were having a conversation, a stranger entered and demanded the bag of money right away. Andrew reported that Dan Smith quickly handed his bag of money to a stranger. He mentioned that his father asked the man to stop, but the man shot his father with a handgun that looked like the one Andrew usually played with. Following this, his mother told him to take his younger sister, Naomi, to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew grabbed his sister and found a hiding spot. At that moment, the criminal aimed a gun at Angela. The 9-year-old boy suspected the stranger was after money. He described the stranger as a very tall man with a fake-looking beard, matching what a witness from Rainbow Cleaners had reported. During their investigation, the police looked closely at the Hawkinsmith family's business. They found out that the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop was actually owned by Steve Devine. Usually, he was present during transactions on Fridays with Dan Smith, but on the morning of September 20th, he was not there. This absence raised alarms, and finding out where he was became a major priority. Steve Devine reported an allergic reaction that morning, leading him to cancel all his appointments. His wife supported his account. Additionally, his alibi and the absence of a silver pickup truck in his possession helped clear him as a suspect. Steve Devine explained that there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop because the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith, had removed the security system. The new owner had not yet installed a replacement. Kenneth Allen Keith, 48, is a pastor, just like Michael Hawkinsmith. After being diagnosed with brain cancer, he sold his pawn shop. However, he still owns a similar business called Gold Rush Buyers, located in Pulaski County near Danville's Bowles district. Kenneth and Michael have been friends for 15 years, a bond that started when Michael worked at a church youth camp. The Hawkinsmith family held a deep respect for Pastor Kenneth, who was like a cherished uncle to Andrew. As investigators lacked significant leads, they opted to review the street surveillance footage from around ABC Gold Games and More, as well as several pawn shops. They discovered a camera located on the office building of Danville Rentals, a real estate company. The surveillance video recorded a silver pickup truck at 8:45 a.m., but the footage was too blurry to identify the license plate or the make of the vehicle. However, eyewitness testimony from Rainbow Cleaners was crucial in helping the police identify the vehicle involved. The witness noted that the vehicle was an older model with a unique square body shape. The video evidence also clearly displayed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the vehicle indicated that the police may have located the criminal's vehicle. They then expanded their search to surveillance systems further away from the pawn shop. At 8:17 a.m., cameras at Ephraim McDowell Hospital recorded the same vehicle. Investigators confirmed that it was a silver Dodge pickup truck. Dan Smith's family was heartbroken by his death. Though they were filled with sadness, they attended the funeral and managed to control their anger. Meanwhile, the Danville police appealed to the public for any information about the crime or the vehicle involved. On September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Hurl, a pastor from Warren, Michigan. He said he was a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they talked about the Danville murders. During that conversation, Kenneth seemed different. Pastor Kenneth told Tracy that he was driving to Danville that day to get medication for his wife. Kenneth also expressed feelings of guilt about the situation, as he had allowed Michael Hawkinsmith to take over his former business. It became clear that Kenneth's relationship with the Hawkinsmith family was not as people had perceived. Tracy reported a conversation with Kenneth in which Kenneth accused Michael of being a fraud and claimed that Michael tried to take over his business. This raised suspicions and led to Kenneth being considered a suspect. To confirm Kenneth's alibi, investigators planned to check the surveillance footage from Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where Kenneth stated he bought medication for his wife at 9:24 a.m. Surveillance footage shows that Kenneth entered the pharmacy. However, just a few minutes before, he was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which are significant features of a suspect. This does not eliminate the possibility that Kenneth could still be involved in the attack. Notably, there was a 6-minute interval between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and Kenneth's arrival at the pharmacy. The police investigated whether it was feasible to travel from the crime scene to Good Neighbor Pharmacy in just a few minutes. They determined that the trip took approximately 5 minutes, suggesting that Kenneth could have committed the murder, quickly driven to the pharmacy and created a convincing alibi. Additionally, a key piece of evidence was that Kenneth owned a silver, unregistered 2008 Dodge pickup truck. All the evidence gathered was circumstantial and insufficient for an arrest. As a result, the investigators asked Tracy Hurl to take part in a series of staged phone calls targeting Kenneth. Thankfully, Tracy agreed to help. During these calls, Kenneth eventually expressed his real feelings about the Hawkinsmith family. Everyone had been anticipating this moment. Kenneth started talking about details of the case that had not been revealed before. He stated that he was in Danville, specifically at the pharmacy. He confirmed that he was at the pharmacy during the events in question. Kenneth then clarified that he had left Danville and gone back to Somerset. After that, he drove to the car wash to get ready for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 a.m., camera footage recorded Kenneth walking down the hallway to the cash register with a clear smile on his face. Additional footage from outside the building captured Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25 a.m., which aligns with earlier images from various surveillance cameras in Danville. At that stage, police had sufficient evidence to arrest Kenneth. However, when they proposed a lie detector test to determine his involvement in the case, he responded oddly. He stated that he wouldn't be able to pass the test because, during his military service, he had been involved in special missions where he had killed several individuals. Investigators carried out a search warrant at Kenneth's pawn shop and uncovered crucial evidence. They found a fake beard and a large amount of cash, but there was no legal explanation for how he acquired it. Notably, they also discovered bundles of money tied with a ribbon, labeled with the name of the bank that issued them, suggesting that Dan Smith was a customer. Further investigation showed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a deceased broker, raising suspicions about his involvement. Moreover, investigators discovered several .22 caliber shell casings in the pawn shop. Ballistic analysis confirmed that these casings were fired from the same type of weapon used to shoot Andrew and Naomi's parents. Kenneth Allen Keith faced 3 charges: first-degree murder, 3 counts, and robbery. He thought that Michael and Steve were plotting to oust him from the business. Despite his beliefs, there was no evidence to support that Michael and Steve were involved in any conspiracy. When Kenneth met Dan Smith at the pawn shop, he attempted to devise a fake scheme to convince the police that the case was a robbery. However, the plan backfired when the police investigated and found no evidence of any wrongdoing by Michael and Steve. On September 20th, Kenneth drove his silver Dodge Caravan to Danville. He drove around the pawn shop until he spotted Dan Smith's car parked nearby. Kenneth then shot and killed Dan Smith, Michael Hawkinsmith, and Angela Hawkinsmith. After stealing all the cash, Kenneth calmly left the scene of the crime and went to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy. This visit was recorded by surveillance cameras, which helped him create a false alibi. Kenneth chose to wash his car in what seems to be an effort to eliminate any possible evidence that could be on it. Before his sentencing in 2017, Kenneth Allen Keith admitted guilt to all charges brought against him and was consequently sentenced to life in prison. In reflecting on the tragic events surrounding the Hawkinsmith family and Dan Smith, it's clear that this story resonates deeply with many. The heartbreak felt by the community underscores the fragility of trust, especially when betrayal comes from those we consider friends. As the investigation unraveled the chilling motives of Kenneth Allen Keith, it served as a poignant reminder of how quickly a normal day can transform into a nightmare. The innocence of the children, caught in such horrific circumstances, evokes a sense of profound empathy and admiration for their resilience. Furthermore, this case highlights the essential need for safety measures in our communities, reminding us of the importance of vigilance and awareness in our everyday lives. While the final sentencing brought some sense of justice, the emotional scars left on the families and the broader community will linger long after. Ultimately, May we take these lessons to heart, cherishing our loved ones and fostering a spirit of compassion and understanding in the face of unimaginable sorrow.